mists that clung to the banks of the Green Fork at dawn were cool enough to beat upon steel and fur alike, and Robb Stark savored the bite of that chill as though it were life itself. Dawn's color seeped over the water in muted layers. Slate, pewter, then the faintest blush of rose, while campfires glimmered behind him like scattered embers of a dying starfield. He stood alone upon a bluff near the river, gray wind pacing at his side, the direwolf's breath a pale plume. Each gust of wind carried the loamy scent of wet earth and new grass, and beneath that, subtler threads of smoke, horse sweat, and war-forged iron. It might have been beautiful were it not charged with peril. Robb could almost taste the promise of blood in the crisp air, an iron tang that set his teeth on edge. He listened, not merely with ears, but with the instinct that had kept him alive since he first wrapped his father's gray cloak about his shoulders and named himself king in the north. Somewhere beyond the gentle splash of current and the snap of canvas in the wind, the twins awaited. So did Walder Frey, a man whose petty pride could plunge kingdoms into night. Robb's fingers drifted along the red leather of his scabbard, tracing the spiral pattern Catelyn had once sewn there as a boy's gift. Lady Catelyn stood several paces behind him now, cloaked in shadow and worry. She had scarcely slept. Rumors had ridden faster than the outriders these past days. Whispers of sudden levies mustered within the twins' walls, of casks of Dornish wine rolling into the great hall, though the kitchens had been meant for a sober feast. None of it was certain. Yet the pale flicker that leapt in her eyes told Robb she believed every rumor twice over. He could almost see the weight of each unspoken fear pressing the lines at the corners of her mouth, fine cracks that grief had etched and worry widened. "Robb?" Her voice broke the hush, soft as a mother's lullaby, but girded with caution sharpened in courts and battlefields alike. "If we ride today, we ride blind." "I won't ride in blind," Robb answered, eyes fixed upon the far bank's dim silhouette. "We'll send scouts under truce first, and we hold our own bridge of steel, should Lord Walder feign courtesy." Gray wind gave a low, rumbling growl, tail stiff as though the direwolf shared his king's misgivings. The sound rumbled through Robb's breastbone, a second heartbeat echoing his own. Downriver, the camp stirred. Banners unfurled, gray direwolf of Stark, roaring sunburst of Karstark, Umber's giant, Manderly's white merman. They flapped in a breeze just strong enough to make the fabric crack like tiny whips. Every color seemed dulled, as though dawn itself conspired with their enemies to drain the Northmen of fire. The men moved with efficient quiet, sharpening spears, cinching saddle girths, rolling blankets. 4 campaigns had whittled them to veterans, and each looked with a soldier's weary acceptance at this next march into the unknown. Lord Edmure emerged from the maze of tents, shrugging into a coat of riveted mail. The richness of River Run's blue and red trout glimmered upon his surcoat, though his face bore the wan fatigue of too many vigils beside the Tully sickbeds. He trudged toward Robb, boots squelching softly in damp grass. "Ravens returned," he reported, lifting a roll of parchment. "Lord Walder swears the bridges stand open. Warm hearths, bread and salt. He summons us to feast before we cross." "A sweeter invitation than I'd expected," Robb said. "Too sweet." I liked it little either." Edmure's shoulders hunched as though bracing against unseen rain. "But Frey holds the only safe crossing for 50 leagues. To delay gives Tywin time to reinforce the trident. Every Southron league we gain now is a thorn in his heel." Then, Robb felt the river's breeze coil through his cloak, carrying with it faint echoes of past councils, of Great Jem roaring for assault, of Roose Bolton cautioning patience, of Mage Mormont declaring that a king who would not dare was no king at all. The memory of Roose's quiet rasp slithered under Robb's collar like cold water. But Roose Bolton was gone, sent with prisoners toward the Dreadfort months ago. And with him, a certain muttered poison had left Robb's ear. "We will go," Robb declared at last, "but not unguarded. Lord Walder shall host a handful, no more than 200 spears at our backs in his halls. The rest camp north of the causeway, in full readiness." His gaze flicked toward the sunrise, which now bled crimson along the horizon's edge. bold as a battlefield wound. If Frey means treachery, I would rather meet it steel-clad than supplicant. Catelyn closed her eyes briefly. Perhaps she prayed for the wisdom that had once guided her husband. Robb's heart squeezed with sudden longing. He could imagine Eddard Stark standing in this very dawn, gaze steady as the wall, silent, but for the quiet council of honor. That ghostly recollection strengthened him, even as it ached. Behind them, trumpets sounded a low, throaty note. Men mounted. Hooves thudded in the sopping earth. Robb swung into his saddle with practiced ease, gray wind loping ahead. As the vanguard formed, he raised his sword. No ceremony, only the necessary signal, and the host began to roll forward like a slow tide. The miles to the twins were deceptively serene. River reeds bowed under gentle breeze, thrushes darted through alder thickets. But every grove stole the eyes of his outriders, and every bend in the road seemed to promise crossbow quarrels. Near midday, one scout returned at a gallop with trousers splashed in fresh mud. "No banners on the ramparts, Your Grace," he reported, chest heaving. "But banquet flags atop the east tower. Cookfires aplenty." Robb's jaw tightened. Walder Frey had always prized pageantry over piety. The old man would be lavish in pretense even were he planning murder. Yet banners withheld? That omission unsettled him more than 100 crossbows might. A lord who welcomes a king flaunts colors for all the world, unless he would rather the world see nothing at all. The green fork narrowed where the twins' ancient keeps rose upon low islands of stone and earth, their squat towers bound by a great arching span. From afar they resembled a pair of gray fists clutching the river's throat. As Robb's column wound over the last ridge, the bridge silhouettes sharpened, and from their parapets drifted only the Frey quartered blue and gray, limp in still air. No bright direwolf of Stark flew beside it, though Walder Frey had once sworn to raise it at Robb's coming. The escort halted at a palisade erected on the northern bank. Frey men in patchwork armor lounged by the gate. One, thin as a cane, nose hooked like a hawk's beak, stepped forward. "Lord Walder bids Your Grace enter and break bread," the man called. His voice cracked on the honorific, as if unused to respect. "You shall have bridge and bedding for your retinue. He awaits within the hall." "We accept," Robb replied, the words tasting of ash. "Yet I'll not cross with my strength blindfolded. My bannermen camp here, with leave to water horses and draw from the river. We take hostages. 2 of Lord Walder's grandsons will suffice." As token of his good faith, the Frey envoy's eyes narrowed. "The crossing is no ransom market, Your Grace. And I am no lamb." Robb eased his cloak aside so sunlight gleamed across his mail. "Grandson, sir, or we pitch siege ladders before nightfall." Silence stretched, punctuated by distant gull cries and the creak of hempen rope. The envoy swallowed, then bowed. "Stiff as a spar. I shall relay your terms." Turning, he strode through the gate, boots clattering upon planks. Catelyn drew nearer, her whisper urgent. "You force his hand." "I warn his hand," Robb murmured. "If he means us harm, let him weigh treachery against the lives of his own blood." An hour passed before the Frey returned, 2 sullen boys in tow, green-eyed, freckled, perhaps 10 and 12. They stared at Robb with mingled awe and resentment. The envoy handed over short documents bearing Lord Walder's spidery signature. "His lordship accedes. Bread and salt shall be set before you. These captives ride under your banner until departure." Robb nodded, and so the gate swung wide. Gray wind padded beside his mount as they crossed a timber bridge over the moat, then the great stone arch. Every footfall echoed through him like a drum of fate. Archers lined the battlements above, arrows unnocked, yet quivers brimming. He felt their eyes weight his shoulders heavier than armor. Within the East Keep's yard, freckled hens scratched dust near stacked barrels of fresh pitch. A cluster of Frey ladies curtsied, their gowns mottled in drab hues that matched the walls. The cloying smell of roasted boar floated on heat shimmering from the kitchens. Musicians tuned lutes at the hall doors, strumming tentative chords that slipped from major to minor so quickly it sounded like music afraid of itself. Lord Walder himself waited atop the dais, hunched in a throne of dark oak, At 90, his bones had perhaps fused with the wood. He only deigned to move his eyes, glittering beneath lids heavy with rheum. His mouth twisted in something near a smile. "King Robb," he croaked, as servants fluttered about pouring ale. "Had I known you'd demand pups for hostage, I'd have sent you babes in swaddling. More assumption of innocence." The old man's voice oozed amused contempt. "I require living surety, no matter the age," Robb answered, stepping across the rushes. The great hall smelled of meat and freshly strewn herbs. Under it lingered a sharper tang of resin, as though the rafters themselves sweated pitch. "I thank you for bread and salt." He took the loaf offered by a scrawny squire, dipped it in a bowl of coarse salt, tasted, then passed both to Lady Catelyn, who did likewise. Walder's many heirs filled the benches. Sons, grandsons, bastard Walder Rivers, plump daughters and daughter-wives. Most wore smiles so thin, they functioned as knives. Yet one pair of eyes caught Robb's with genuine warmth. Rosalind, delicate as a wisp, cheeks flushed. She gave a timid nod. Long ago Robb had promised to wed one of her sisters, another fragile blossom he scarcely remembered. His broken troth might still bloom into blood. As they took seats, minstrels began a lilting ballad about brave Florian. Robb found the tune jarring against the tension thrumming through the hall. He forced cordial words, accepted wine, answered perfunctory toasts. Yet his gaze roved ceaselessly. The positions of guards, the width of casement windows, whether torches burned pitch dark or plain tallow. Behind Walder, a tapestry depicted the conquest. Aegon's dragon sweeping fields of fire. Robb's eyes lingered on the dragon wings even as Lord Walder spoke. "I hear you seek King's Landing," the old man rasped. "'Tis a bold path for a boy with half his father's men." "Half, and more heart than the Lannisters' dream," Robb replied. "But heart needs bridges. And loyalty." Walder's chin dipped an inch. "You broke a promise due my house. Did you think I'd forget? No hopes." Robb had prayed the slight might dull beneath time and distance, but Frey vindictiveness was cast in steel. He met the old man's stare. "You wrong my queen," he said, voice quiet but flinty. "Jane is no caprice. The gods bore witness to that marriage, as they shall to any I keep." Walder's lips smacked wetly. "Gods may smile on lovers, but lords count coin owed. Yet, debt can be repaid." He flicked his fingers. A servant bustled forward bearing a scroll. "The crossing remains yours, for a price." Catelyn's breath caught. Edmure leaned. The scroll unfurled, list of stipulations spilled like intestines. New marriage pacts, Frey garrison, rights at Moat Cailin, trade privileges at White Harbor, the fosterage of Lord Walder's 12th born at Winterfell. Robb's temper flared hot behind his brow. "You would ransom the river?" he growled. Every Frey within earshot stiffened. Grey Wind's hackles rose, a low snarl curling from his throat. Walder's grin held. "Ransom. Investment, King Robb. Invest or swim." Bansarchial. Silence thickened like boiled syrup. Every eye swung between Stark and Frey, as if the hall itself waited for steel. Robb felt a throb behind his ears, pulse mirrored in the furrow of his gauntlets. Yet, instead of reaching for his sword, he reached deep for the river's calm. Chains rattled at Oxcross, Eddard whispered across years. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword, but only when judgment's full. He leaned back, voice even. "I shall review your terms this night." Walder blinked. He had expected shouting, perhaps. The old spider knew how to weave rage into traps. Robb returned a cool serpent smile. "And I shall amend them." A hush accompanied the arrival of silver platters. Roast boar crackled, honeyed carrots steamed. Barley pottages sent up clouds fragrant with thyme. The feast progressed in uneasy spurts of fork scrape and forced jest. Catelyn murmured with Edmure, weighing each clause like stones upon scales. Greyjohn Umber drank by measured sips, knuckles white where they clenched his cup. Even the musicians faltered, strings slipping from tune. When at last the final course, almond cakes dusted in sugar, was set, Robb rose. "You've shown hospitality," he announced to the hall, pitching his tone for every ear. "I shall rest beneath your roof this night. At dawn we cross." Walder inclined his head. "At dawn you cross," he echoed. But Robb thought he glimpsed something reptilian flicker in the old man's eyes. Annoyance? Calculation? That evening, Robb convened his captains in a cramped solar above the kitchens. Candles sputtered, walls sweated grease. Maps lay unfurled, pinned by daggers and pewter cups. Each captain wore suspicion like armor. Grachan slammed a ham-sized fist upon the table. "We break them now, rip their bloody stones apart and ford at will. Storming the Twins would cost 1,000 lives in 3 days we cannot spare," Catelyn countered. "And Tywin Lannister will not wait idle in the south." Sir Brynden Blackfish traced a finger down the green fork. Yet to trust Walder Frey is to sheathe one's sword in a scorpion burrow. Robb absorbed their words, weighing risk against necessity. At last he spoke. "Tomorrow we cross. Yet not as Walder plans. The vanguard will ride under truce, half foot, half horse. But at twilight tonight, 500 spears will depart camp, circle downstream under cover of darkness, and seize the ferry landing 4 leagues west. If Frey treachery springs, we'll cut loose, strike from the rear, and carve our way south along the western bank." "Bam?" Grey John's grin split beard. "Blood and blizzard, that's a wolf's bite." Edmure nodded, relief flickering. "I can command the ferry column." "Good. Choose your swiftest." Robb rolled the map. "Let no horn announce your march." Catelyn touched his sleeve when the captains departed. "You play a dangerous lyre," she murmured. "Better that than dance to Frey strings." Robb clasped her hand. "I must see us beyond those towers, Mother. Once we touch the south bank, Walder's leverage ends." In the corridor beyond, torches hissed. The twins' innards seemed to breathe with their own damp lungs. Robb heard distant infant wails, the clamor of unseen kitchens, the click of dice where gods gambled coin and fate. He took it all in as he walked, storing each corridor in memory. Night deepened. Moonlight pried through arrow slits and slender blades. Robb retired to a modest chamber reserved for honored guests. It stank faintly of mildew, as though seldom used, and there he knelt. He thought of winter snows blanketing Winterfell's godswood, of the heart tree's gnarled face. Here, only rough-hewn beams overhead. But he whispered the old words nonetheless. "Watch over them. Watch over the north." Sleep proved elusive. When at last slumber claimed him, it did so abruptly, pulling him into blackness crowned by gray wolf dreams. He was running, always running, river spray shimmering off fur, red eyes watching from a bridge above, arrows raining like dark feathers. He roused at a sound, not of dream, but real. Soft footpads just beyond the door. Gray wind lifted from the hearth, ears pricked. Then, a low, throaty cough, followed by shuffling. Robb slipped from bed, sword in hand. He eased the door open, and saw only a chambermaid dousing torches down the corridor. She startled, bobbed a curtsy, retreated. Yet Robb's skin continued to crawl long after she vanished. Before dawn's first violet, horns cried from the yard. The Northmen formed ranks in lamplight, shadows tall upon stone. Robb donned plate and chain, mantle of gray and white sewn by his queen's deft fingers. He met his mother's worried gaze, then pivoted toward the courtyard. Walder Frey awaited in a furred cloak, flanked by 4 sons. "The bridge is yours," he declared in mocking gallantry. Robb glimpsed no warmth in the man's eyes, only calculation, as inexorable as tides upon Riverland's shores. The vanguard advanced. Edmure's secret column had already slipped into darkness hours earlier, a silent gamble upon which all futures now balanced. Robb rode at the head, gray wind pacing. The arches of the bridge yawned before them like twin jaws. He crossed beneath murder holes where he swore he could feel unseen eyes drawing bead on the space between his shoulder blades. Halfway across, a bell tolled, deep and resonant. Robb's heart slammed. He wheeled his horse instinctively, scanning ramparts. But no arrows fell. Instead, gates creaked behind, sealing with iron rasp. Across the span, Walder's men raised portcullises. The twins were closing behind them, but the south bank opened. A promise of freedom or ambush. Beneath hooves, the bridge shuddered. Not from weight, but from something else. A rhythm, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Hoofbeats an echo not of their own number. Robb's gaze lifted downriver. From tree line west of the crossing emerged riders, Idmoor's column, steel flashing in dawnlight. They thundered for the ferry landing as planned, banners unfurling like black wings. The sight filled Robb with fierce hope. The trap, if any, now had teeth at both ends. He pressed heels to his mount. Forward! They poured from the southern tower into mist-laced field. Beyond, highway snaked toward Seaguard, Harrenhal's distant smoke, and south, always south, toward the gold-lined palaces of King's Landing, where the Iron Throne waited cold beneath 1,000 swords. Robb Stark felt dawn's chill melt into the furnace heat of purpose. Today he had crossed more than a river. He had crossed the threshold, where fear ends and fate begins. Yet even as hoofbeats drummed upon packed earth, he cast one last look over his shoulder at the grim silhouettes of the twins dissolving into fog. Behind stone walls, Walder Frey's shape lingered like a carrion crow upon battlements. Robb could not read that distant face, but he sensed the old man's thoughts carried south with him, sharp as barbs. He turned away, faced the road, and urged his host onward into the thin light of a world, poised upon a precipice neither side yet understood. Hours slipped by in steady march. Sun climbed, pale gold diffused through high cloud. Birds wheeled overhead, curious at the procession of men, wagons, and war dogs, trundling like an endless serpent. Robb rode among outriders, exchanging terse signals. Scouts fanned left and right, probing hedgerows for ambush. A dust plume rose behind, marking progress upon the parchment of the riverlands. Mid-afternoon found them near a deserted hamlet, hugging a bend in the road. Half the thatch had burned months earlier. Blackened beams jutted like skeletal ribs. Robb halted the column and ordered a brief rest. While cooks kindled fires, he walked the ruins, gray wind ranging ahead. In a tumbled garden, he knelt among scorched apple trees, plucking a single puckered fruit, charred on one side. He stared at it, imagining children once scrambling through these branches. Laughter replaced by cries when war rolled through. Caitlin joined him. She bent, picked another apple, smaller, wholly shriveled. "Is this what our crowns cost?" she whispered. Robb turned the fruit over, black skin flaking. "If so, we must pay in full and swiftly, so the riverlands may heal." As swiftly, yet not rashly. She brushed ash from her skirts. "I see Eddard's patience in you, but also his honor. Beware that honor, Robb. It won't be named on the ledgers the crows keep." Nenden Tor. He looked past her to the stretch of road unreeling south, like a promise etched upon horizon. "I know, mother. Yet what am I without it?" Gray wind barked suddenly. The direwolf bounded to a crumbled doorway, nose twitching. Robb followed, hand on hilt. Within lay a cellar mouth, darkness yawning. Two hillmen emerged from shadow. Ragged, gaunt. They flinched, hands raised. One clutched a makeshift spear. Robb signaled calm. "We mean no harm," he said. "Food and water await beyond." The men stared, disbelief and hope warring in their eyes. Caitlin offered the apple she held. They accepted as though offered a crown. Robb watched them shuffle toward cooking fires. Each displaced soul he aided felt like a seed planted in scorched fields. Let them bear witness that wolves marched not merely for vengeance. By dusk, scouts returned with tidings. Lannister outriders spied 2 leagues east, shadowing parallel. Robb convened captains again beneath a makeshift pavilion of stretched sailcloth. Maps fluttered in lamplight while moths battered the flames. "They test our flank," Sir Brendan warned, finger-tapping inked hills. "If Tywin rides from Harrenhal, he'll strike north along this road. We may meet his van in days." Robb studied the terrain. River curves, ridgelines, abandoned forts. "We cut east at first light," he decided, toward the Red Fork. A forced march through the alder bogs should outpace Tywin, and place us near Acorn Hall by festival's eve." Great John grunted approval. Others murmured. Catelyn, alone, looked troubled. "And the men?" she asked softly. "3 forced marches in 1 week. They will tire." "They will endure," Robb answered. Yet he felt the weight of her concern settle like mail upon his shoulders. 5 hours of story yet to come. 5 days of road. 5,000 perils between them and the Iron Throne. But each step carried the north further from despair. That night, stars shimmered cold and bright. Robb took watch a while, gray wind beside him, both staring south where darkness swallowed the horizon. Somewhere beyond, twin hearts beat inside a lion's chest. Joffrey's childish cruelty, Cersei's iron will. Further still, a grandfather's cunning shaped armies like clay. Robb closed his eyes, breathing the scent of pine resin and distant river, and whispered to the wind. "Soon." The wind answered in sighs through ruined rafters, through meadow grass, through every blade of steel humming on the plain. It seemed to carry voices, of bannermen sleeping uneasy, of mothers in Winterfell praying before heart trees, of wolves howling across snowfields under a foreign moon. Those voices wove together, and beneath them pulsed the deeper growl of fate. When Robb opened his eyes, dawn's first tremor of light touched eastern clouds. Time to ride again. He rose, shook dew from cloak, and roused his guard. As hoofbeats gathered in rhythmic thunder, he felt the pulse of the host thrum through ground and bone. One more sunrise toward destiny. One more beat in a saga that would not end at the Twins or at the Trident, but at the very gates of King's Landing, where crowns were forged in wildfire or shattered under wolf-clawed resolve. He mounted, breath misting. Gray wind paced ahead, tail high. Trumpets brayed. The column surged forth, iron-shod and unbroken, banners snapping like storm-tossed sails. And above the rumble of 5,000 boots and hooves, above the clink of mail and the creak of wagons, rang Robb Stark's steady voice calling the march. Onward, south, into legend's unwritten pages. He. The alder bogs began as a faint stain upon the horizon, a furred line of green so deep it darkened the early light. But by mid-morning the stain swallowed the sky and the host alike. War wagons slowed first, their iron-rimmed wheels hissing against mud that sucked and clung like a living thing. Then came the horse lines, animals blowing through flared nostrils, fetlocks splattered to the knee. By the time the banners reached the marsh's lip, every footfall slurped. Robb Stark called the halt from horseback, raising a gloved fist, and 5,000 men spilled outward in wary ripples, their reflections wavering in pools no deeper than a man's shin, yet treacherous as a frozen lake in spring. The bog smelled of rot and mint, of lilies half-drowned and ancient peat risen from sleep. Gray wind padded to a hummock tufted with rushes, nose twitching at a swirl of midges before snapping them from the air. The direwolf's paws left neat crescents that filled at once, vanishing beneath brown water flecked with green scum. Robb dismounted beside him, splashing to mid-calf, and gestured to the captain of engineers. "Corduroy roads," he ordered. "Lay them fast and light, no more than 2 carts abreast. I want the vanguard across by sunset." "Yes, your grace." Sir Benfrey Talhart saluted and barked for axes. Men broke rank, shouldering timber cut up river the day before. Their boots stirred the silt, releasing a faint shimmer of gas that caught the sun and winked like ghost fire atop the pools. Catelyn watched from the drier shelf of ground where the baggage train clustered. The wind lifted strands of her auburn hair, and with them, Robb saw the furrows at her brow deepen. Worry for those slogging ahead, worry for those still pursuing behind. He splashed to her side. 3 miles to the far rim, he said softly. "Once we clear it, we'll make camp on the ridge and let the horses rest." "And Lannister outriders?" She kept her voice low. "Meant for him alone. A bog can hide many things, but not 6,000 Lannister spears if Tywin drives them hard. 6,000 cannot ride so quietly that gray wind will miss their scent," Robb answered, tipping his head toward the direwolf now circling a cluster of reeds. "Still, I've set scouts on every flank. Arya used to stalk birds in the Godswood by stepping where leaves had already fallen. I told my outriders to do the same. Her quick smile faded as swift as it came, chased by memory of the daughter lost in King's Landing. She gripped his wrist. "Do not let honor blind you to cunning, Robb. Your father showed me that we must be cunning to keep honor alive." His hand closed over hers. "I remember." She nodded but did not release him till a runner splashed near, breathless with news that Edmure's ferry column had been sighted upriver. Banners intact and prisoners unharmed. Only then did her fingers ease. The work went on. Axemen felled birch and alder at the forest's fringe, their strokes ringing dull through the damp. Men hauled trunks to the bog's edge, laid them side by side, and bound them with hemp soaked so the fibers swelled. Others unspooled lengths of planking, slat by slat, until a narrow strip of roadway slid forward like a snake's tongue over the quagmire. Wagon teams urged on, wheels bumping from log to log. Somewhere a horse screamed, then another splash thundered as a cart lurched sideways. But the corduroy held. Robb walked among the workers, offering shoulder grips and quiet praise. No flourish, only the steady presence of a commander who saw toil and did not shrink from its grime. The men answered with grins or weary nods. A few muttered oaths that transformed to fierce pride the moment his shadow passed. Kings won fewer hearts at tourneys than here, knee-deep in marsh water under a sky that threatened rain. By late afternoon the vanguard had inched half the host through. The sun, veiled behind slate clouds, cast no warmth, yet sweat slicked every brow. Cooks lit braziers atop the ridge where the first units already rested, smoke curling in lazy spirals that drew crows from distant elm branches. Robb climbed the final rise just as thunder groaned far to the east. Below, the bog shimmered like a broken mirror, 100 men reflected upon its shards. Great Janumber awaited at the crest, armor unlaced to the navel. "Mud's thicker than me mother's gravy," he rumbled, slapping a fist against his breastplate. "Half my men lost boots." One lad walked the last furlong barefoot, swearing hell-tan leechskin into sandals. He laughed, a booming sound that startled the crows into flight. "You'll count your boots tonight," Robb said, pulling off a soaked glove. "Write the number lost. Quartermasters must know." "Aye, your grace." "And what of supper?" "The men'll need more than salt pork after this slog." They'll have stewed oats with dried apple and a ration of ale. I've ordered fishing lines set in the old mill pond beyond that rise. If we're fortunate, pike for the captains." He glanced west, where the land rose again, crowned by crumbling stone. A meal tastes better when fetched from enemy country. Great John's eyes glimmered approval. "Aye, a wolf feeds on what he takes." Evening deepened. Fire speckled the ridge in amber constellations, twinning against a sky now bruised purple. The men pitched tents amid thick grass, patting mounts, scraping tack, laughing at the leeches they peeled from calves and forearms. Edmure's column arrived just before dusk, hooves caked in river mud but spirits high. News traveled at campfire speed. The ferry landing had been seized unopposed, Frey boatmen cowed into service, and 2 small casks of Dornish red captured for the king's table. Riverrun's lord swung down from horseback, embraced Robb, and in a breath recounted every mile of his covert march. The words tumbled in relief more than pride. They shared a cup of the pilfered wine, thin but fragrant, and Robb felt the day's strain slip from his shoulders, carried away by tannic warmth. When darkness settled, he summoned captains to a council within a ring of shields planted upright in the turf. Torches stabbed shadows outward, while maps weighted by daggers pinned the little light that remained. Sir Brynden traced a route with the butt of a spear, 30 miles southeast through low hills to Acorn Hall, then southward another 40 to the Red Fork Ford at Lord Harroway's town. Beyond that lay rolling country patrolled by House Derry's remnants, and whatever columns Sir Gregor Clegane might loose from Harrenhal. "We skirted one of Clegane's patrols 2 nights past," the Blackfish said, voice as grim as winter water. 30 horse, heavy cloaks of flayed squirrels on their helms, his jest at our sigils no doubt. They lit a barn rather than fight. Smoke guided us away. "They test our pace," Robb murmured, fingertips drumming the map. "Clegane never wastes good horse on parlor tricks unless ordered. Tywin keeps his mastiffs for the jugular." He looked to Sir Benfrey. "How soon can you raise a screen of scouts 10 miles forward in both flanks?" 2 hours before dawn, the engineer answered. I'll send men who can read owl calls better than ink. Do it. If the mountain rides, I'd greet him without surprise. Robb rose. Rest in relays tonight. We march at first light. They dispersed, torches dwindling one by one. Robb lingered after, the map still spread, flame licking its frayed corners. Catelyn approached, cloak cinched tight against a breeze that smelt of thunderhead. Her eyes flicked to the shield wall ringed around them, now empty. You intend to engage, Sir Gregor? I intend to be ready if he seeks us. Robb folded the map, slid it into its leather tube. But no pitched battle until we choose the ground. The alder bog showed me how men vanish in mud. I prefer them standing when swords meet. And Lady Talisa? Catelyn asked softly. Talisa because she could not bring herself to say Jane lest the camp hear. Any word from River Run? Not since the Raven 4 days gone. He tried to keep the ache from his voice. She and the Westerlings remain well guarded. Uncle Brynden left a dozen scouts along the Green Fork, should the Lannisters think to steal a queen. Nectum. It is not only Lannisters I fear. She touched his arm. The phrase may yet feel cheated. They shall find no gain in striking at my back. Walder's bridge is worth more alive. Yet even as he said it, Robb remembered the old man's gaze watching him depart the twins. Sharp as ice. Weighing risk against revenge, he pushed the thought aside. Storms ahead must claim attention, not ghosts behind. They found sleep at last in separate tents, mother and son, each turning upon rough canvas beneath the same rolling thunder. Robb dreamed again. He ran through dark woods, gray winds snarling at his heels, and somewhere ahead a weeping woman knelt beneath a heart tree that bled red sap. He reached but could not touch. Roots tangled about his wrists, holding him back while the woman's face shifted between Talisa and Lady Stoneheart. A name his mind did not know yet still whispered. He woke before dawn, heart hammering, and dressed to the drum of rain upon leather. The march south resumed beneath a steady downpour that turned dust to slurry. Cloaks darkened, mail gleamed slick, and the banners flapped heavy, their cloth so soaked it clung to poles like dead skins. Yet spirits held. Rain washed sweat, drew leeches from pores, and muffled the rattle of gear. Robb rode near the van, gray wind trotting through puddles that burst like coins beneath gray paws. Scouts returned at intervals, dripping but whole. No Clegane yet, no Lannister pikes, only abandoned fields where wheat sprouted patchy in the mud, and orchards sagged under unpicked fruit. Toward midday the rain slackened to mist. The column crested a gentle rise, and beheld Acorn Hall spread below, like a child's toy castle, set among rolling copses of oak. Its curtain wall was low, its towers squat, but smoke curled from chimneys and banners snapped. How Smallwood's brown branch upon green, and that alone gladdened hearts starved of any roof but cloth. Trumpets sounded a welcome as they approached. The drawbar lifted without demand of hostages. Lady Ravella Smallwood herself stood beneath the portcullis, flanked by household knights, no more than 20 all told. Her smile carved deep lines at the eyes, but pride held her shoulders straight. "King Robb," she greeted as he dismounted, dipping in a curtsy that stirred mud but not dignity. "Be welcome. My hall is humble yet loyal to River Run and the direwolf alike." Her gaze flicked to the direwolf in question, who sniffed the gate stones, tail low but calm. Robb bowed, rain dripping from his hair. "You honor us, my lady. We ask only shelter for our wounded and hearth for a night." "You shall have two," she said, quick, before courtesy could forbid. "Your men may quarter in the western orchard, the soil there drains well. I've barley in store, and a cooper's hogshead of small beer fit for an army's thirst." She guided them through the yard, where small folk gawked from beneath awnings. Inside the hall proved warmer than Robb expected. Rushes strewn with dried mint and lavender, ham smoking over a stone hearth, benches polished by 3 generations of elbows. She offered hot broth before anything else, thin but spiced with pepper so the steam bit the tongue and cleared the bogs damp from lungs at first sip. Robb thanked her, then oversaw billets and ration allotments while noon passed in a blur of commands. Afternoon brought a surprise when a scout named Hareth Kane was led before him, dripping yet grinning through a split lip. "Rode farther than my post, your grace. the man confessed, kneeling. South ridge by the standing stones. Spied dust columns eastward. 100 horse, maybe more. Lions on red field. How far? Robb asked, leaning forward. 5 miles when I left. They made no rush, probing, I'd say. Looked light armored, no spear wall. Sir Brynden canted his head. Sir Gregor rides heavy. These may be the bastard of Derry scouts. Robb considered. If so, they'll circle wide, counting tents and numbers before dusk. He faced the scout. You've done well. Eat, treat that lip, then rest until sundown. When the man had gone, Catelyn lowered her voice. Will you recall the garrison? I intend to greet our guests properly, Robb replied. Great John will ride out with 400 cavalry, quiet. At dusk we strike their rear, scatter them before they glimpse our full strength. No captives likely, but a message delivered. He allowed himself a thin smile. Let Tywin learn that wolves nip faster than lions prowl. The raid unfolded beneath a red sun, sinking into clouds heavy as slag. Great Jin's riders slipped from the orchard like shadows. Hooves muffled in sod softened by rain. Robb stood on the battlements beside Lady Smallwood and watched them fade into the dells. Banners furled, torches unlit. Lady Smallwood's son, small for 12, wrapped in 2 large gauntlets, gripped the parapet and stared after them with wide eyes. Will they die? He asked Robb, voice scarcely a whisper. Not tonight, Robb told him, placing a gloved hand on the boy's shoulder. Tonight, they teach lions to fear dark woods. Night gathered in layers, violet, then ink, then a black, so thick even torchlight seemed to hesitate at the thresholds. Within the hall, minstrels struck up quiet tunes, strings soft enough to blend with the hiss of rain beginning anew. Robb supped on nettle soup and bread dunked in salted butter, aware of every minute dragging past. Each tick of the iron clock above the hearth felt loud as a mace on steel. When at last hoofs clattered beyond the gate around second moonrise, relief surged so sudden, he feared his knees might buckle. Great John strode through the hall doors, mud to hip, beard spattered red, blood or clay, hard to tell. He held aloft a torn banner. Crimson field, golden lion ripped near in half, staff broken. Brought you a scrap, he boomed. The rest went squealing into the dark. Lost 12 horses, not a man. He thumped the banner down before the dais. Lannister outriders'll think twice before sniffing our skirts. Cheers erupted from captains at table. Robb nodded thanks, but his gaze lingered on the lion's sundered sigil. Another piece on the Savas board tumbled, but Tywin would note each loss and reset for the next gambit. They marched again at dawn, Lady Smallwood's larders lighter, her gratitude heavy despite the depletion. She pressed upon Robb a finely wrought cloak of brown wool lined with acorn-dyed silk, citing that a king who saved her people from lion claws must carry their sigil as warg against the next hunt. He accepted, draping it over his shoulders with murmured vow to return victory's share of spoils to every riverlord still loyal. The road south coiled through rolling heath now, purple with heather bloom despite autumn's edge. Streams cut the land like silver veins, cold enough to numb ankles yet clear as prophecy. The host made good time, spirits buoyed by the Skirmishes' triumph. Yet 3 days later, as tents rose near a ruined sept of the Stone Maiden, ravens brought darker tidings. Sir Helman Talhart unrolled the parchment before Robb inside a canvas command tent, fluttering against gusty wind. Message bears the red hand of Tully, he said. Sent from Riverrun 3 days past. Robb read once, then twice, the words tilting beneath his gaze. Tywin Lannister marches from Harrenhal with 17,000, heavy foot and 400 knights. His van crossed the Red Fork near Fairmarket. Edmure's scouts harry from the flank, but cannot slow. Destination believed to be the king's host. Gods keep you, nephew. Robb exhaled through teeth. He means to cut between us and River Run, or force us into open battle we cannot refuse. Sir Helman muttered a curse. Catelyn, called to council quickly, arrived just as Great John sprang to his feet. Then let's give old Lord Twin a bellyful o' steel, he barked. I'll carve my name on his skull for he knows which way north lies. No. Robb tapped the map. If we turn to meet him now, We dance to his tune. Tywin's strength lies in siege and set piece, not pursuit. We march faster, not slower. He traced their route onward, south past Lord Harroway's town, then crossing the Blackwater Rush by ferry at the Antlers, and finally cutting east of Duskendale into Crownland's fields where Lannister levies ran thinnest. We aim for King's Landing still, but we feint. He jabbed a point west of their course. Send word north and east that the wolf host marches on Maidenpool instead. Let Tywin shift to block us while we slip round his heel. Sir Bryndon's eyes gleamed. Ghost trails and mirror banners. I like it. Catelyn frowned. But who to carry such falsehood? Lannister eyes will sift every raven wing. Then we trade wings for tongues, Robb said. Greatjon, choose 3 bold riders. Dress them as hedge knights who drank too much around our fires. Send them north under cover of night, loud in every tavern about our grand assault upon Maidenpool. He paused. Make certain one is caught. Greatjon chuckled, as if relishing the role. I'll find a loud enough drunkard. The ruse took shape next dawn. While the main host struck camp and rolled south, 3 riders peeled north at a gallop, cursing Robb's name loud enough for every hedge in earshot. Behind them, Grey Wind watched until they vanished, then trotted after his king with a low huff, as though certain their theatrics would fool none but children. Robb scratched behind a gray ear. Trust, he whispered. The direwolf slid amber eyes toward him. Acceptance, perhaps? Or warning he could not read. Days blurred into miles. The weather shifted, cold mornings bright with rime upon grass, midday warming enough to draw dragonflies in lazy spirals over watercups left by hooves. They forded the Red Fork at a shallow crossing hedgerow miners had used before the war, each wagon lifted by teams doubled for the task. On the far bank, they found evidence of recent passage. Hoof prints deep and wide, charred cook sites, bones gnawed by dogs. Robb knelt beside one print, the horseshoe large as his spread hand. Cleggin's heavy destriers, Sir Bryndon said behind him. 2 days, maybe 3. Robb rose. They'll have orders to slow, not to strike. Tywin wants us intact until he chooses ground. He brushed mud from his gloves. Then we choose ground first. By the 7th day since Acorn Hall, Lord Harroway's town came into hazy view, a scatter of burned cottages and one squat tower standing amid charred foundations. Smoke rose anew from its walls, black plumes that signaled occupation. Robb called a halt within a copse of black pines and sent scouts crawling belly low through barley stubble. They returned near dusk, faces bleak. Lannister spears garrisoned the tower, 200 at least, with cages of dogs along the outer yard, and fresh stakes hammered in nigh 100 paces to each side, sharpened for cavalry repulse. Sir Gregor. Sure as winter, Edmure muttered, scrubbing a hand across his stubbled chin. He stakes the ground like a butcher lining troughs. Robb stared west where sun speared through broken cloud, gilding the tower top. We could storm at night, Greatjon offered, flexing fingers eager for thunder. Robb shook his head. Too dear a cost, he said. We go around but not unseen. He ordered archers to the forest edge. As dusk fell, they loosed flights of pitch-tipped arrows upon the tower's wooden roof. Flames bloomed scarlet against the dark, licking upward. Lannister horns brayed alarm. Men scrambled to swat sparks even as the wolf host melted east. Torches doused, boots muffled by fresh-cut boughs. By the time Sir Gregor mustered a sortie to chase shadows, Robb's rearguard had slipped 3 miles beyond, leaving only blackened thatch and a burnt-in message. Chase us and bleed. 2 days later, word arrived from the north. Tywin had wheeled east, believing Robb bound for the coast near Maidenpool. His van camped at Chambers Bridge. His baggage train lagged behind, heavy and slow. The old lion took the bait, and the road ahead lay thin of gold and crimson. Robb allowed himself a rare grin, shared with Grey Wind beneath a moonless sky. We have distance, he told the direwolf. Not victory yet, but breathing room. He let the men rest an extra hour that night. Fires rose, stories followed, wine passed hand to hand. Robb drifted tent to tent, listening. One knot of veterans recalling the bite of northern winter. Another of green boys betting who'd be first over King's Landing's walls. Amid laughter, he felt the gravity of command lighten, if only for breaths at a time. Catelyn found him near the last fire, watching sparks climb like souls set loose. "They love you," she said softly. "They follow hope," he answered, eyes on the spark. "And hope follows you." He did not reply. Somewhere in the dark, an owl hooted thrice. The scout's signal. Robb straightened, instinct bristling. Moments later, a rider approached, soaked and winded. "Message from White Harbor, Your Grace," the rider said, handing over a damp parchment. Robb broke the seal. Lord Wyman reported that Stannis Baratheon had drawn his fleet to Blackwater Bay again. Banners of the fiery heart aflame above masts, though none dared yet move on the city. King's Landing now braced beneath two storms. A wolf by land, a stag by sea. Robb folded the news against his palm. The tide rises. Morning found the host upon a ridge overlooking the rolling plain of the Antlers. Below, the Blackwater rush gleamed pewter beneath early sun, its far bank dotted by tilled fields unharvested under war's pall. A narrow ferry sculled between moorings, crew unaware of what approached from the north. Robb sent riders under flag of truce. They returned with the ferrymaster's tremulous consent to bear wolves instead of wheat. Wagons disassembled, pontoons lashed, and one by one, the north crossed into Crownlands. It was there, on southern soil, that dread lifted like fog burned away by news heat. Every man felt it. A loosening of the noose, a widening of odds. No Frey towers brooding behind now, no call of Tywin's iron tail snapping. Ahead, only the city they had come to claim or shatter. Robb allowed a single night of feast on the far bank. Barrels of ale seized at Harroway's, wheels of hard cheese from a frightened cheesemonger's barn, and 3 hogs fat enough to feed a company each. Fires crackled high. Bards plucked strings to river frogs' chorus. Even gray wind seemed lighter, trotting camp's perimeter with tail raised, pausing now and again to accept a bone flung his way. Robb sat upon an upturned wine cask, a wooden plate on his knee, watching sparks leap. Edmure strummed a borrowed lute across the circle, fingers fumbling but tune passable. Sir Brynden drank from a horn etched with trout and direwolf entwined, his rare smile humbling. Great John roared a verse of the maiden and her bear, though half the words slurred into nonsense. Catelyn joined quietly, folding her cloak, and for a rare beat Robb felt the heaviness of his crown ease. He spoke then of Winterfell's harvest dances, of Bran climbing towers too high, of Rickon hiding nuts for wolves that never went hungry. Men listened, entranced by stories of a north few had seen. Laughter rose, soft but sincere. When the fires burned low, Robb lingered by the river alone. The stars wheeled overhead, sharp as whetted blades. Water lapped the shore, rhythmic, eternal, whispering songs older than castles. He knelt to skim a hand across its chill surface. This river would carry them now, by current or by blood, toward the Iron Throne. "Your Grace?" He looked up. Daisy Mormont stood at the tree line, moonlight silvering the bear badge on her breast. "Forgive," she said, stepping close enough for whisper. "A raven from Deepwood Motte arrived. Alice Karstark's handwriting." She handed the small scroll. Robb unrolled it, reading by star gleam. Alice wrote that House Karstark's remaining levies had marched south without leave, bent on vengeance for Lord Rickard's death and Robb's mercy toward his son Harrion. They made for Lannister lands, harrying, rogues now, flying no banner. Robb's stomach tightened. The north fractured at its joints. Each bone might break under its own weight. He folded the message. "Thank you, Lady Daisy. Send reply by dawn. Alice is to gather loyalists, hold Deepwood. I swear to address her claims after the war." Daisy inclined her head. "I'll see it done." Alone again, Robb breathed the night. The scents of smoke and wet grass. Duty piled like stones upon his ribs, yet within that weight he found a steady core. The road still pointed forward, and each burden would be lifted or avenged in King's Landing's shadow. At first light, they struck camp. The host wound between hedgerows lined with blackberry bramble and the early white blossoms of meadowsweet. The Blackwater curved east, shallow enough here for wading. Beyond lay rolling vineyards abandoned to birds. The ground beneath hooves hardened, turned chalky, and dust rose anew. 2 leagues shy of Southhorn Ridge, Grey Wind halted, hackles flaring. Robb reined in. A heartbeat later the wind shifted, and on it came the faint thunder of drums. Not war drums, ship's drums. He nudged his horse to the ridge's crown. Below, a wide sweep of the Blackwater opened, and beyond, to the southeast, sails filled the river's mouth, antlered stag upon gold, crowned within a fiery heart. Stannis Baratheon's fleet glided upriver like a silent wall. At Robb's back, men gathered, gawking. Catelyn climbed the slope, breath caught. "The Lord of Storm's end," she whispered. "Or the rightful king," Robb answered, more to himself than to her. The 7 kingdoms had 3 kings still, one in red silk, one in blackened plate, and one now astride a direwolf banner stained with mud and promise. The board grew crowded, pieces shoving for space. Drums beat again, boom, boom, echoing across water. Sails bellied as the wind stiffened from the east, smelling of salt and the far dark sea. Robb Stark watched, Grey Wind silent at his side. Sunlight pierced a rent in the clouds and struck the helms of Stannis' vanguard, so they gleamed red gold. Between wolf on land and stag on water, the lion's den lay directly ahead. Robb raised his sword until it flashed in that same sudden light. The men below hushed, eyes lifting. He spoke in steady voice that carried far. "South lies the foe that burns our homes, steals our kin, and calls it right. We have marched through mud and blood and storm to answer. We are the North. We do not bend, we do not break, we bite, and today we hunt." A roar answered, rolling across the ridge and down to the river, where Baratheon drums beat on. Robb wheeled his horse, cloak of acorns streaming, and the host began to move again. They would not reach King's Landing that day, nor the next, nor perhaps the week after, for war was a maze that twisted upon each new choice. But the gate was in sight, and so long as the wolf's eyes remained fixed upon it, every turn, every dead end, every hidden knife would fall behind, one by one, until at last the maze ended in iron and fire, and the song of steel ringing beneath towers older than crowns. Dusk found the camp pitched within view of the city's distant walls, black specks upon the horizon by torchlight. Scouts rode west toward Hayford, while others lingered near the riverbanks to watch Stannis' fleet anchor in silent array. That night, Robb could see the flicker of their masthead lanterns, a chain of stars reflected upon water. He left the command tent late, cloaked tight, and walked among sleeping men. Grey Wind padded at heel. At the edge of camp, he stopped, toes touching dew-wet grass. In the distance, King's Landing's walls caught the moon, faint and pale. Somewhere within those stones, a boy called King and a woman called Mother plotted to keep thrones forged from 100 stolen blades. Somewhere within, Sansa Stark dreamed of home or despair. Somewhere, Jaime Lannister perhaps lay shackled in a cell, the golden hand of Tywin curling invisible strings even now. Robb breathed deep. The wind smelled of distant sewage, of tanneries and cook fires and fear. He tasted salt from the river, smoke from Stannis' galleys, and beneath it all, a faint intimation of wildfire, though none had yet been lit. He felt Grey Wind stiffen. The wolf too sensed that sharp green tang, memory of sorcery waiting in secret vaults. "Not tonight," Robb whispered, stroking coarse fur. But soon. Grey Wind lowered his head, eyes fixed south, ears cutting the dark like knives. Behind them, the camp slept, unaware of words passing between man and beast. Ahead, King's Landing slumbered restlessly under twin shadows. A wolf from the north, a stag from the storm, both rising upon the same tide. The night held its breath, balanced on the edge of steel, and Robb Stark, son of Eddard, king in the north, and soon perhaps in more, stood beneath unfamiliar stars that gleamed with the same chill light that once shone on Winterfell's snow. The road had been long, the price dear, but not yet final. He closed his eyes, and for an instant he saw the heart tree, saw wolves running through untouched drifts, and felt the cold warmth of home. Then he opened them upon the city ahead, upon towers and battlements and destinies, knotted like war banners in the wind. The wolf host would howl there soon enough. But for this moment, night's hush covered crown and commoner alike, and the heartbeat of the realm throbbed in the dark between breaths, waiting for the dawn when swords would rise and history would tilt upon their edges. Robb turned back toward camp, gray wind beside him, the silhouette of direwolf and king merging into one shape against the low glow of distant fires. They walked in silence, yet every step sang with the promise that neither lion's roar nor stag's hammer could quell the voice of the north once it had begun to speak. And speak it would, in steel, in ice, in blood, until the last word echoed from the Red Keep's stones or vanished in the ashes of a world remade. Ka Kendewan. The sky hung thick with pre-dawn murk, a smothering, colorless veil draped over the sprawl of tents, half-muffled horse lines, and huddled men sleeping beneath whatever tattered cloaks they could find. The banners, direwolf, trout, merman, bear, giant, stood motionless in the soft wind, limp but not bowed. The fields here on the north bank of the Blackwater were bruised from the tramp of thousands of boots. They had yet to stain with the blood of battle, but war's scent was in the air, sour and coppery, overripe and waiting for a spark. Robb Stark did not sleep that night, nor did he lie. He paced the edges of the command tent, counting his breaths, counting his burdens, counting the names of the men who had fallen so far to put him within sight of these high walls and golden domes. Gray wind slept a wolf's sleep by the threshold, motionless save for the occasional flick of an ear when something far off stirred in the night. Catelyn sat at the little field table, sewing. She worked by the light of a stubby candle, mending the tear in Robb's sleeve she had noticed a day before, her hands sure despite the tremble she tried to hide. "You must rest," she said, not looking up. "I can rest when the city's ours," he replied. But he closed his eyes for a moment and let the silence hold him, just a little. When he opened them again, she was gazing at him, her face a map of love and fear and memory. "Do you remember the snow, Robb?" she asked softly. "When you and Jon would race in the yard, and Arya would climb the walls and vanish for hours, only to come back with her face streaked in soot, pockets full of stones? It all seems a dream now." "It was a dream," he said, and he smiled. "I wonder if we'll ever wake." When dawn's first blush bled through the clouds, the camp came alive with a nervous, purposeful energy. Horns sounded in low, mournful notes. Cook fires flared. Men lined up for bread, cold cheese, dried apples. Horses were led down to the river and watered carefully, each beast checked for signs of lameness or fever. The armorers hammered out dents, oiled leather, counted arrows by handfuls, mended broken spear shafts with lengths of willow stripped from the riverbank. Robb met with his captains on a gentle rise that overlooked the distant city. The view from here was both heartening and terrible. King's Landing glimmered beneath the thick mist, her red and gold banners flapping listlessly atop the towers, her many-gated walls an unbroken line of gray stone. Beyond the city, the Blackwater snaked toward the dawn, wider than the Trident, reflecting the silhouettes of Stannis' fleet clustered in the bay. Warships, galleys, cogs, all bristling with men and fear and the promise of flame. Edmure Tully rode up first, helm under one arm, his eyes sunken with sleeplessness. Beside him came Great Jon Umber, face already ruddy with anticipation, and Lady Mage Mormont, her braids swinging like a rope of black iron down her back. Sir Brynden Blackfish had been out since moonset, gathering news from scouts. He joined them last, still dusted with dew and grime. "Tywin Lannister's van is no more than 2 days behind us," Brynden reported, tapping the map with a grimy finger. "His outriders probed the woods at every turn, and his banners have been spotted near Sow's Horn. But the main host remains slow. Too many wagons, too many camp followers, and he's lost the taste for haste since we slipped him at Harroway's." "Good," Robb said. "He does not want to fight us here, not so near the city and the river both." He's hoping we'll throw ourselves at these walls, break and scatter. Or else he hopes to draw us out, trap us between his army and the garrison inside King's Landing. But he can't move quickly with so many behind him, and we're faster on this ground." Greatjon cracked his knuckles. "Then let's take the fight to them, Your Grace. Let the lion find he's not the only hunter left in these woods. I'd ride out and—" "We hold," Robb said, cutting across him. "We are not the hounds today, Jon. Let Tywin chase shadows." He turned to the Blackfish. "What of Stannis?" "The fleet stands ready," Brynden said. "No word from his own scouts, but I wager he's waiting for our signal, or else for us to commit to an assault, so he can land men upriver and strike at the city's wharves. But he's not a patient man, Robb. Too long, and he'll go without us." Lady Mage grunted. "If the stag breaks before we do, Lannister will sweep him from the river, and then turn all his strength on us. And if we go first, Stannis may not follow, or he may let us bleed the city white for him. We must make him an offer he can't refuse," Robb said, his mind turning. "Or rather, we must make it so he has no choice but to join us." He looked down at the map, seeing the contours of land and water, the flow of the Blackwater, the deep forests to the north, the winding roads and causeways. He saw it as a living thing, with a pulse and a hunger and a will of its own. "Here," he said at last, stabbing the tip of his dagger at a bend in the river a mile upstream from the city's northernmost gate. "If Stannis will land his men there, and we strike at the same time from the north, the city must split its defense. If Tywin comes, he will find us behind walls and water, not on open field. If we break through, the city is ours, and Stannis cannot claim the crown without fighting us. If he refuses, we take the city alone. And he will never forgive himself for missing the moment." He looked up at his captains. "It is a gamble, but every hour we wait, Tywin grows nearer. Send riders to the Baratheon ships, fast ones, bearing our seal. Tell Lord Stannis I propose a joint assault at dawn on the second day hence. If he agrees, we move as one. If he does not, we move alone." The captains nodded, some with more eagerness than others. Greatjon was already grinning, his hand on the pommel of his sword. Sir Brynden nodded once, his eyes sharp and cold. Lady Mage Mormont clapped Robb on the shoulder, a gesture that almost knocked him sideways. "We will need every trick we have," Robb said, voice dropping. "If the Lannisters see what is coming, they will set fire to the fields, loose their gold cloaks upon the camps, poison wells if they must. No mercy should be expected, nor any given. Once we move like wolves." That night, as the messengers rode out along the riverbank, the camp grew tense and quiet. Catelyn lingered beside the main fire, her hands still restless. The wind shifted, carrying the distant scent of brine and tar from the Baratheon fleet, the musk of horses, the sweat of too many men pressed too close together for too many days. "Do you trust him?" she asked as Robb took a seat beside her. "Stannis?" Robb shook his head. "I trust that he will do what best serves himself. If that means breaking the city with us, he will do it. If not, then he will stand aside, and we shall find our own victory or death." She nodded, and for a time they sat in silence, listening to the night. On the second day before dawn, word came back from the river. Lord Stannis had agreed. His ships would land men north of the city at first light, their banners raised. Robb's host would strike from the riverbank, while Stannis battered the Mudgate and Fish Market quays. The pact was signed by both kings' own hand, sealed with wax, and the ancient words of houses, old before Aegon's birth. Men roused from sleep with grim resolve. Armor was donned in darkness, shields painted anew with white stripes. Wolf, trout, bear, merman, so all would know friend from foe in the smoke to come. Priests moved through the ranks, mumbling prayers to the seven, to the old gods, to any god that would listen. There were some who prayed to the drowned god, or to the stranger, or to the red god, but most simply gripped their sword hilts and murmured the names of mothers, wives, children, fathers, names that meant more than any blessing. Robb rode the lines as the sun crept up, his cloak damp with river mist. The men called his name, some with cheers, some with whispered pleas. He smiled for them, nodded, let Grey Wind range ahead, knowing the sight of the direwolf was a comfort to many and a terror to some. At the north bank of the Blackwater, near the bend chosen for the assault, the army gathered in silence. Scaled ladders lay ready, pikes bristled in tight blocks, and archers strung their bows, flexing cold, stiff fingers. The river flowed quietly, almost serene, its surface broken only by the slow drift of the occasional log or carcass. On the far bank, King's Landing's northern gate, Barrowgate, stood watchful, its walls recently patched, its towers bristling with Lannister archers and banners. The morning wind carried a sudden trumpet call from the bay. Stannis ships had moved, sails unfurling like wings. The sun caught the gold and red and blue on the water, dazzling. On the far shore, horns answered, thin and nervous. The city's defenders had seen. It was time. Robb lifted his sword, shining in the first true light of day. His voice was steady and loud, ringing across the waiting men. We are the North. We are the Riverlands. Today, we break the line that has held us from our home and our honor. Today, we show them the strength of men who have endured hunger and loss and fire. The city lies ahead, but our hearts remain behind, in the snow and wind, in the fields we fight to reclaim. Strike hard, strike true. Let no lion bar the gate. A roar answered him, deep, wild. The sound of men who knew what waited at their backs if they failed. Grey Wind howled, and it seemed the land itself shivered. The ladders went up first, men surging through the knee-high water, arrows slashing down from the ramparts. Shields raised, they pressed forward, the first to reach the stone walls battered by rocks and quarrels, but more followed, wave after wave. Robb rode behind the second line, sword lifted, barking commands. Archers fired in volleys, aiming at the towers, at the gaps in the parapet, at any shape in Lannister red. On the river, Baratheon galleys surged toward the wharves. Grappling lines flew. Soldiers leapt from prows to piers. Flames leapt up as oil was poured and torches thrown. Smoke rolled over the city, dark and bitter. The bells of King's Landing began to ring. First one, then many. A wild, discordant peal of warning and terror. For an hour, for two, the fight raged at the walls. Men died in the water, in the mud, on the stone. Each ladder cost a dozen lives, but eventually one held. A Northman, young, his beard not yet full, reached the top, shield splintered, axe red. He fell with a Lannister sergeant, but the space he won let two more rise after, then 10, then 100. Robb was among the first over. He cut a path across the parapet, Grey Wind at his side, the direwolf's jaws crimson. Edmure and the Blackfish took the next tower, clearing the archers with sword and pike. Below, the gates trembled as Mormont's women set axes to the timbers. A battering ram, cobbled from a fallen willow, crashed again and again. At last the hinges screamed, iron gave, and the Barrowgate opened to let in the wolf. Within the city, chaos ruled. Crowds surged in narrow lanes, desperate to flee the fighting or loot what they could. Gold cloaks fought Lannister men at the crossroads, uncertain of which master to serve. Bells rang, bells tolled, horns blew, commands shouted in every tongue and accent. The market square ran red. Stannis men poured in from the wharves, battered but relentless, banners streaming. At the fish market they clashed with the city's defenders, some loyal to the crown, some to the highest bidder, many to none but themselves. The flames spread from the docks to the alleys, driving rats and men alike into the open. Robb's host pressed south and east, following the plan mapped in camp by candle and memory. He drove a wedge between the Red Keep and the Sept, aiming to split the Lannister defenders from the Gold Cloaks, who now wavered, many throwing down arms or even joining the North. At the great Sept of Beeler, a line of knights in gilded armor made a last stand, protecting a party fleeing for the castle. Cersei Lannister among them, her hair hidden beneath a cowl, her eyes wild. The Queen's escort fought desperately, but Robb's men had the numbers and the fury. Catelyn, riding behind the lines with a small guard, saw Cersei caught and pulled from her saddle, shrieking curses. Her son, King Joffrey, had already been whisked away toward the Red Keep by Sir Meryn Trant. The city's last resistance came at the Iron Gate, where Lannister bannermen rallied 100 knights and tried to break out. They were met by a countercharge led by Great John Umber, who took a lance in the leg but hewed a path through the melee, laughing as he bled. The lion banners fell at last, trampled in the mud and blood of their own making. By mid-afternoon, the fighting slowed. Smoke curled from half the city. Fires burned unchecked in Flea Bottom. But the city itself was won. Atop the ramparts, the direwolf banner was raised, flapping high over the battered gate. Men cheered, wept, fell to their knees. Robb stood atop the city wall, sword raised, hair matted with sweat, eyes red-rimmed and hollowed by exhaustion and triumph. The Red Keep still held, but its garrison was cut off, surrounded by the wolf and the stag. Robb called for his captains, ordering the wounded tended, the fires quenched, and all looting ended on pain of death. At sunset, the two kings met. Stannis Baratheon approached from the wharves, his cloak torn, his face hard and implacable. He wore a crown of beaten iron and a surcoat marked with the burning heart. Robb waited at the city's main square, surrounded by his own guard, with Catelyn at his side. "Lord Stannis," he said, his voice echoing through the smoke-thick air. "King in the north," Stannis replied. "You've taken the city by storm, but the Red Keep remains. My claim is by right and by law. Do you yield?" "I yield nothing," Robb answered, and his voice was steady as iron. "The Red Keep is surrounded. Its garrison will fall by morning. The city has bled enough for one day. I propose a council, here, tonight. The claim to the throne must be decided by those who have the strength and right to hold it." Stannis' jaw worked, teeth grinding. Behind him, Melisandre watched with unreadable eyes, her red gown blazing in the last light. At length, Stannis nodded once. "Very well. But know that I will not set aside my claim for the sake of peace." "Nor will I," Robb said. "But we are not children, to settle matters with fire and wildness. We will speak. Let the fate of the realm be decided with words, as well as swords." That night, the council met in the audience chamber of the ruined Guildhall. Robb, Stannis, Catelyn, Sir Brynden, Melisandre, Sir Davos, Edmure, Lady Migi, and others of lesser note sat around the scarred table. The air was thick with the stink of smoke and sweat, the lingering dread of wildfire, though none had yet been unleashed. The debate was fierce. Stannis demanded the crown, citing law, blood, and the treason of the Lannisters. Robb demanded the North, his own crown, and the right of his people to govern themselves. Melisandre pressed for the coming of the Red God's new age, but her words fell on weary, distrustful ears. The hours dragged. Outside, the wounded groaned, the city smoldered, and distant horns sounded from the Red Keep, where Joffrey and his mother still cowered. In the end, it was Catelyn who forced a pause. "Enough," she said. "The city is won, but the realm is broken. If you cannot find a way to share this victory, you will lose it to the next enemy who comes, whether lion, kraken, or dragon. There must be peace, or all we have gained will be lost." Stannis glared, Robb frowned, but none could gainsay her truth. At last, they agreed. An armistice, a council of lords to be summoned from the Seven Kingdoms. Until the council met, Stannis would hold the Red Keep and crown, Robb would rule the North and Riverlands, and Catelyn would remain as host and witness. Sansa Stark would be sought and freed. Joffrey and Cersei would stand trial for their crimes before the lords assembled. The city quieted, in the uneasy dark, held by neither crown nor wolf, but by a shared exhaustion. Robb stood upon the city wall, gray wind at his side, watching the moon rise over the battered towers. "You did it," Catelyn said, standing beside him. "No, Mother," Robb answered. "We did not finish yet. There is always another dawn, always another battle." But tonight, for the first time, he allowed himself to hope. The dawn that followed was soft and pale, the sky washed clean by the night's rain. The bells rang again, but now their peal was slow and solemn, a city mourning her dead and greeting uncertain peace. Robb Stark stood on the ramparts, watching the city come alive. His men worked side by side with Baratheons, clearing rubble, tending the wounded, putting out the last stubborn flames. In the Red Keep, Joffrey Baratheon, king no longer, was dragged before the council, his golden hair tangled, his mouth full of threats. Cersei stood beside him, pride shattered, eyes like shards of green glass. The lords watched in silence as the boy's fate was decided, not by blood alone, but by justice. For the North, Robb declared, there would be peace, so long as the South remembered the price paid in winter and in war. For the Riverlands, Edmure spoke, and for the Crownlands, Stannis. Each pledged to send envoys, to keep faith, to build anew from the ashes. The weeks that followed were full of hard work, long councils, and the steady, painful healing of a broken city. News spread that the lion had been cast down, that the wolf and the stag held uneasy peace. Far to the east, rumors grew of dragons, and in the south, the kraken stirred. But for one precious span of time, the realm rested. And Robb Stark, king in the north and lord of his fate, stood watch, remembering the snow of home and the taste of victory that was both sweet and bitter as blood. He walked the city streets, saw children play in alleys where swords had clashed, heard laughter rising from windows unshuttered at last. He spoke with lords and small folk alike, and each time he did, he remembered his father's words. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. He strove to be worthy of that lesson in every judgment, in every promise kept or broken. In the godswood of the Red Keep, Robb knelt before the heart tree, the pale bark stained crimson by the city's strange light. He closed his eyes and saw the snows of Winterfell, heard the distant howl of wolves. "I am yours," he whispered, "and I will not forget." The future waited, uncertain, perilous, but open as the dawn. The north had come south, and the world would never be the same. Night had passed gently. A hush laid over the battered sprawl of King's Landing, as if the city itself, bruised and weeping, dared not breathe lest the spell of peace be broken. In the pre-dawn hours the city's wounds steamed beneath the touch of the soft rain, the cobbled lanes running dark and clean for the first time since war arrived at her gates. The scent was of scorched timbers, wet earth, the lingering iron of old blood. But underneath these sharper notes, the faint promise of green things grew. Grass sprouting between the stones, ivy clutching broken wall. There had been too many dawns like this for Robb Stark, each one an aftershock, each one marking the world's passage into something changed and unpromised. He awoke before the sun and dressed without summoning a servant. Grey Wind, sprawled on the marble floor beside his cot, lifted his head and yawned wide, then trotted to heel. The direwolf's presence was a comfort amid the strange grandeur of the Tower of the Hand. A wing that stank of rose water, spiced wine and old hidden fear. Robb washed in cold water, donned tunic and mail, then layered over it the cloak Lady Smallwood had pressed on him, the brown of acorn and earth. He looked for a moment at the cracked mirror above the basin, and saw in it not the face of a king, but that of his father. Jaw set, eyes too old for his years, mouth caught between duty and longing. Down the stairs he went, boot heels ringing sharp against stone. The guards on the landing bowed, eyes wide as always when Grey Wind passed. Robb nodded to them, offering the silent comfort of command. In the hall below, the fires still burned in the great hearth. Catelyn was already awake, standing in the light of the orange flames with a cup of small beer in hand, gazing into the fire as if the past lived somewhere within. "Did you sleep?" she asked as he entered, her voice gentle but worn. "A little," Robb replied. "Enough." She shook her head, not rebuking but understanding. "There's bread and cheese on the table if you wish it." He did, but only after seeing that she had eaten first. They broke their fast in companionable silence, Robb pulling the last of the crust apart for Grey Wind, who wolfed it down and licked his lips expectantly. Outside, a low bell tolled. First one, then another. Dawn in the city. The day of reckoning. The city was already astir by the time Robb left the Tower of the Hand. The streets were thick with the hum of a people tentatively rebuilding. Small folk in patched cloaks and barefoot boys with buckets darted through alleys, carrying water to douse stubborn embers. Gold cloaks, fewer now and humbled, watched the gates and stood at corners, their faces tired but alert. The banners of the wolf and the stag flew side by side above the city walls, but in the market squares, it was the wolf that the people pointed at with awe and fear. Northmen moved among the city folk, hands ever at sword or axe. The Riverland's banners clustered near the river, men of house Manderley and Mallister, at ease only among their own. He strode east, flanked by his own men and watched by hundreds. They whispered as he passed. King in the north, some said. The young wolf, others. He caught other names as well. The Oathkeeper, the Lord of Winter, the Breaker of Chains. Names came easily to a desperate city, and they clung to hope as fiercely as to bread. Robb accepted none, but returned each wary glance with the shadow of a smile, cold as the mists on the neck. At the great sept of Baelor, rubble and ash carpeted the steps. The doors stood open, the last fires within just dying. He entered, boots echoing against stone, gray wind's claws ticking beside him. The heart of the city's faith lay exposed, sunlight pouring through broken glass. The statues of the Seven, blackened by smoke, loomed in shadow. Kneeling before the mother's statue was Sansa Stark. For a heartbeat Robb could only stare. His little sister, grown now, her hair dulled by soot and hardship, her eyes rimmed red but clear. She did not look up at his approach, but kept her hands folded. He waited, respectful, until at last she stood, brushed off her skirts, and turned. "Robb," she said, her voice unsteady. "I thought you might not come." He crossed the distance between them and embraced her, pulling her tight against his mail and leather. Sansa trembled in his arms, shoulders heaving. He let her weep, only smoothing her hair and murmuring comfort. "I am here, little bird," he said softly, the words old as Winterfell's stones. "And you are safe. I'm not little any longer," she managed, drawing back and smiling through her tears. "No, you're not." He studied her. So tall now, so composed despite the storm she'd weathered. "Will you come with us, to the Tower of the Hand? Mother will be glad beyond words to see you." She nodded, eyes shadowed with secrets she would not yet tell. "Let me just say a prayer for those who cannot leave." She knelt again, whispered quietly, then joined Robb and Grey Wind as they made their way out of the sept. They passed through the city together, Sansa's hand resting on Robb's arm. The city folk stared at her with the same awe and curiosity they gave Robb. Sansa Stark, Princess of the North, the Wolf Maiden, survivor of the Lion's Den. She kept her chin high and her step sure, though Robb could feel her shivering. The sun broke through by the time they returned to the tower. Catelyn, upon seeing her daughter in the doorway, cried out, joy and anguish mingling, and held Sansa as though to never let go. The three Starks stood for a long time in that embrace, Grey Wind nosing at their feet, before duty called again. A council had been summoned at noon. Robb dressed for it as a king, buckling on his sword, letting his men array him in cloak and mail and the silver circlet of the north. He saw Sansa and Catelyn off to a smaller solar, then strode with Sir Brynden and Edmure to the council chambers within the Red Keep itself. The great hall was crowded, thick with banners and rumor. Stannis Baratheon sat at the head of the table, face impassive, his maester at one side, Melisandre at the other. On Stannis' right was Sir Davos, battered but alive, fingers drumming. On Robb's left, Catelyn and Edmure. Behind, the lords of the Riverlands, the North, and those of the city who had survived the sack, men of house, Darklyn, Hayford, Massey, and even a few rare Lannister loyalists who had bent the knee. They came together as if to pass judgment on the realm itself. Stannis opened with harsh efficiency. "The crown is mine by right of blood and law. The Red Keep holds by my banner. The boy Joffrey and his mother will stand trial for treason and murder. The lords of Westeros must choose now. Bend knee to the true king, or see their houses fall with the Lannisters." Robb did not flinch. "I have no interest in southern crowns. The north is free, as are the riverlands under our protection. We have won this city by blood and bone, and I will not see my men's sacrifice ignored. Let there be peace between our realms, Stannis Baratheon. Let the north and riverlands stand apart. The south may keep its crown and its debts." A murmur rippled through the lords. Stannis' mouth tightened. "Who decides the fate of the boy and his mother?" Edmure Tully demanded. "Too many crimes have gone unanswered. If this council is but a formality, let us say so now." Stannis gestured to Melisandre, who inclined her head, red hair glowing in the sunbeam through the high windows. "The flames have shown the boy's guilt. Let him answer for his sins before all gods, old and new." Catelyn bristled. "The gods are not always just. Let him stand before men, and let the people see that justice in this city does not mean vengeance alone." Menne. It was Sansa who entered then, quiet and pale, escorted by Arya. Arya, ragged and lean, face hard as flint, eyes wild as any wolf's. She had found her way through the broken city and would not be barred from her family or her enemies. She stood by Sansa's side, blade at her hip, hands on the pommel. Robb greeted her with relief and disbelief, a crushing embrace, and saw in her a hope and danger all at once. She was changed, but she was his sister still. "I want to see Joffrey judged," Arya said simply. "I want to see him answer for what he's done." Stannis nodded, and so the trial began. The audience hall was packed with lords, knights, men-at-arms, and small folk. Joffrey Baratheon, once king, was brought before them in chains, his golden hair matted, his mouth set in a petulant line. Cersei, her beauty now sharpened into something fierce and cold, stood beside him, chained as well. Ser Meryn Trant and a handful of Lannister loyalists glowered nearby. A long parade of accusers took the stand. Nobles robbed, servants beaten, small folk maimed, and Sansa herself, who stood before the crowd and recounted Joffrey's cruelties, his lies, his cowardice at the Blackwater, his murder of Ned Stark. The room simmered with rage and sorrow. When Arya took the stand, her voice was hard as iron. "You hunted me for sport," she said. "Sent men after me in the night. Put a price on my head. You killed my father, let my mother be slain, made my sister suffer. You called yourself king, but you're nothing but a butcher's son in a gold crown. None." "Unfair," Joffrey shrieked, threatened, pleaded, but no one listened. Stannis declared judgment. Exile for Cersei to spend her days in the Silent Sister's service, her hair shorn, her name struck from the records. Joffrey, unrepentant, defiant to the last, was condemned to death. Robb spoke before sentence was carried out. "Let no man say the North delights in vengeance. We sought only justice, and now it is done." Joffrey was taken from the hall, kicking and screaming. Arya watched in silence. The days that followed were a slow, strange settling. Stannis took the Iron Throne, Melisandre by his side. The city healed. The wolf banners came down from the ramparts, but remained in the hearts and whispers of the small folk. Sansa and Arya chose to return north with Robb and Catelyn, as did many of the Riverlands lords, hearts raw but resolute. Before they left, Robb met with Stannis one last time in the throne room. The hall was cold, echoing. The throne itself loomed, empty for the moment. The swords of 100 enemies fused and waiting. "I meant what I said," Robb told Stannis. "The North is free. I will not kneel, and the Riverlands stand with us. But I will send no armies against you, so long as you keep faith with your word." Stannis regarded him with that relentless, unblinking stare. "So long as you do not threaten my realm, you shall have your peace, Stark. But if you break it, I will not," Robb said. He hesitated. "Let there be peace, for as long as peace can last." Stannis nodded, and for a moment there was understanding. The Starks departed the city at dawn, banners furled, their host streaming north in long lines along the river roads. The Riverlands lords joined them, Edmure at their head, Lady Mormont riding at the van, Sir Brendan bringing up the rear with 1,000 hard-eyed men. The city's gates opened to let them pass, and the people gathered to watch, some throwing flowers, others only staring. Robb led Sansa and Arya through the gates, Catelyn close behind. Grey Wind trotted at his side, nose twitching at every scent. They crossed the Blackwater at the shallow ford, then took the King's Road north, the long, hard way home. The journey was not swift. The lands they passed through were scarred by war. Villages burned, fields trampled, bones scattered in shallow graves. But the land was healing, green shoots pushing up through the ash, wildflowers nodding by the wayside. At night, they camped by rivers, or in the ruins of old keeps, sharing bread and memory, laughter and grief. Robb spent many nights with his sisters, listening to their stories, marveling at their strength. Sansa told of the Red Keep, of courtiers' plots and poisoned words, of learning to hide herself in plain sight. Arya spoke less but with more force, of flight, of friends lost, of faces taken and vengeance found. Each girl was changed, yet each was stark at heart. Catelyn, for her part, wept often but smiled more. She spoke of Bran and Rickon, left in the safety of White Harbor, of Ned's spirit lingering in the north wind. She took comfort in the company of her children and in the promise of a homecoming. When they crossed into the riverlands, the people lined the roads, cheering. They passed through towns rebuilt since the war, through fields golden with late summer grain. At River Run, Edmure was received as lord and hero. He embraced his family with tears and laughter, and pledged fealty anew to Robb as king in the north. Their journey continued, and as they passed Moat Cailin, the north wind sharpened, carrying with it the scent of pine and snow. The old stones of the castle loomed ahead, battered but unbroken. Robb paused atop the causeway, looking north, his heart swelling. At Winterfell, the gates were thrown open wide, banners flying. Bran and Rickon ran to meet them, older than he remembered, but still children, still his brothers. The household came out. Old Maester Lewin Hodor, the stable boys, the smiths and cooks and washerwomen, all wept to see the Stark family whole again, or as whole as could be. Robb entered the hall with his family at his side. Sansa tall and quiet, Arya wild-eyed, Bran leaning on his cane, Rickon clutching Shaggy Dog's ruff, Catelyn smiling through her tears. Grey Wind led the way, tail high. That night, there was feasting in the great hall. Venison, honeyed carrots, black bread and fresh butter, great wheels of cheese and rivers of mead. Minstrels played, and the walls rang with laughter and song. The people of Winterfell welcomed their lord and his sisters, and the great fires burned bright into the dawn. Robb looked about him at his family, his friends, his people. He remembered the words of his father, the lessons of hardship and hope, the meaning of home. The north wind howled outside, rattling the banners. But within these walls, there was peace and warmth and love. He stood and raised his cup. "To the north," he cried, and the hall answered in thunder. "To the pack." The days that followed were full of labor and joy. Robb met with his bannermen, planned the rebuilding of towns and holds, heard the grievances of small folk, judged disputes, dispensed justice. He took counsel from his mother, his uncle, his sisters. Sansa helped tend to the needs of the people. Arya trained with the guard. Bran spent long hours in the God's Wood beneath the Heart Tree. Rickon ran wild with the wolves, laughter trailing behind him. Robb felt the weight of rule, but also the satisfaction of work well done. The seasons turned, and with them, the world. Messages came from the south. Stannis ruled in King's Landing, holding the peace but not unchallenged. The Iron Islands sent out raiders, but none dared the north. The Vale watched in silence, Dorne smoldered, and in the far east, rumors of dragons persisted. Yet for the north, there was hope. The harvest was good, the fields full. The people built and planted, mended and healed. Winterfell grew strong again, its halls full of life. One evening, as Robb walked the battlements, Arya joined him. She gazed at the horizon, the sky painted in bands of purple and gold. "Do you think it's over?" she asked. "No," he said. "Not forever. But for now, we have peace. For now we have each other." Arya smiled, fierce and bright. "Good. I'm tired of running." Robb ruffled her hair, and together they watched the darkness settle over the land that was theirs, one with blood and courage, guarded by honor and love. In the Godswood, Robb knelt before the heart tree, the red leaves rustling overhead. He pressed his palm to the bark, closed his eyes, and listened to the silence. "Thank you," he whispered, "to his father, to the old gods, to the north itself. I will not forget." The wind answered, gentle as a mother's hand, and Robb Stark, king, brother, son, rose to meet whatever dawn might come. K. Summer ebbed in the north as if the land itself mourned, even while the sun rose gold and pale over Winterfell's frost-wreathed towers. The snows had not yet come, but the wind was sharp, clean, alive with the scents of pine and distant wood smoke, the air rich and cold as memory. The castle had changed in the weeks since Robb's return. Laughter ran through its yards, children's voices echoing where once only crows and the whistle of empty gates had kept company. The banners of Stark snapped above the ramparts, wolf's head gray on white, and in the morning light the stones glimmered as if the old gods themselves had polished them in anticipation. Robb rose before dawn, as was his new habit. Gray wind, grown massive in the months since their last ride together, thudded at his side as they paced the castle's perimeter. The direwolf nipped at dew, chased ravens from the old walls, then settled with a contented rumble at Robb's feet when he paused at the Godswood gate. Robb breathed deep, drawing the icy air into his lungs, feeling the ache and ache again of home restored. He pressed his palm to the carved wood, its surface worn smooth by 100 generations. Every day, before council and command, he made this pilgrimage, seeking what peace could be found. The Godswood, cloaked in red and white and shadow, held a silence Robb had never found elsewhere. Sunlight slanted through the ancient branches, dappling the moss and the fallen leaves, painting the snow in bands of russet and crimson. The heart tree stood sentinel, its carved face serene, bleeding sap from eyes that never closed. Robb knelt before it, gray wind sitting behind him like a gray shadow, both of them still as the statues of the crypt below. He closed his eyes. He did not pray for peace. Peace had come at last after too much war and loss, but for wisdom and the strength to keep what he had won. In the silence he spoke the old words, the vows of winter, of family, of loyalty. When he finished, he rested his forehead against the cool trunk. The gods did not speak, but in the hush Robb heard the distant laughter of his brothers and sisters in the yard, the call of crows, the breath of the direwolf beside him. He rose, dusted the damp earth from his knees, and left the Godswood with a lighter heart than he had carried in months. Gray wind fell in at his side, tail wagging, tongue lolling, a great beast yet gentle with every Stark child. The castle was already alive by the time Robb entered the yard. Bran and Rickon raced wooden swords beneath the watchful eyes of Sir Roderick Castle and Maester Luwin, their shouts ringing bright. Arya, lean and wild, drilled with the guards in the shade, her movement swift as any boy's. Sansa helped in the kitchens, her laughter a balm to the older women, her hands deft as she kneaded bread and braided dough into intricate shapes. Catelyn moved through the halls, dispensing advice and comfort in equal measure. Robb paused, letting his eyes linger on each of them. They had all changed, each grown hard and wise in their own way. Yet in this moment, he saw only his family, safe, whole, and home. He strode into the midst of them, greeting each in turn. "Up early, brother." Arya grinned, sweat streaking her brow. "Earlier than you," he teased, ruffling her hair before she slipped from his grasp, sword still in hand. Sansa looked up from her work and smiled, her eyes bright. "Mother says you'll wear yourself out with all this walking. There's oatcakes and honey in the hall if you're hungry." "I am," Robb admitted. "But first I must see the new smithy. Jonas claims the bellows freeze in the cold, and if that's true, we'll have no swords come winter." He made his rounds, speaking with Jonas, with the stablemaster, with the men-at-arms patrolling the walls. He listened more than he spoke, storing away the small complaints and victories alike. The walls needed repointing. The western gate had lost another hinge. The far fields were thick with rabbits but light on deer. These were the troubles he'd once left to stewards and castellans. Now he attended each, finding comfort in the tangible weight of duty. When he finally entered the great hall, his family gathered at the high table. Catelyn smiled as he sat, and Maester Luwin poured him a cup of small beer. "We've had a letter from White Harbor," Catelyn said, passing him the scroll. "Lord Wyman sends thanks for the grain sent after the last frost, and promises 20 barrels of salt cod before the first snows." Robb unrolled the parchment and read. Wyman's words were flowery but sincere, his promises as rich as the sauces that made him famous. The alliance between North and White Harbor was stronger than it had been in a century, and Robb meant to keep it so. He finished his breakfast as Edmure Tully entered the hall, cheeks pink with cold. "The rivers are up," Edmure announced, rubbing his hands. "We'll need to repair the causeway before winter truly settles in. I've set men to the task, but the old stones are crumbling." "I'll ride out after council," Robb promised. "Take Rickon with me. He knows every rabbit hole. He'll keep the men sharp." Edmure laughed. "If you can keep up with him. The boy's grown wild as any wolf." Demem said all. "So have we all," Robb said, and felt a rush of joy that startled him. The council met as the morning light filled the windows. Robb at the head of the long table, flanked by Catelyn, Edmure, Maester Luwin, and the senior lords and stewards. They spoke of stores and grain, of new roofs and old debts, of repairs and patrols. Robb listened to each, weighing needs, granting leave, promising what he could. When disputes arose, a quarrel over a broken fence, a question of a lost sheep, he settled them gently, remembering his father's hand on his shoulder as he'd watched Eddard judge in this same hall. By midday, the business of rule was done. Robb gathered Rickon and a small party of men, mounted up, and rode out to the causeway. The wind was brisk, the air full of the promise of snow. Rickon rode at his side, cheeks flushed, eyes wide, Shaggy Dog bounding in their wake. They inspected the stones, spoke with the masons, watched as the men set new blocks in place. Rickon scrambled over the old causeway with the other boys, racing along the icy planks, laughing with the wild joy only the young can know. Robb joined them, letting his cares fall away, if only for a moment. When they rode back to Winterfell, dusk was falling. Fires burned in every window, their glow a promise of warmth and safety. The gates opened at their approach, and the courtyard was full of life. Men tending horses, women carrying baskets, children playing at knights and monsters. Robb dismounted, handed off his reins, and walked inside with Rickon at his side. Supper that night was simple: stew thick with venison and root vegetables, bread fresh and hot, cheese, apples, and wine. The hall was loud with talk, the fires roaring. Arya challenged the guards to a foot race, and Sansa sang with the younger children, her voice sweet and clear. Bran told a story of the old kings. Rickon listened wide-eyed, and Catelyn smiled, watching her children as if to imprint every moment in memory. Later, when the hall quieted and the fires burned low, Robb walked the ramparts with gray wind. The sky was bright with stars, the wind high. He paused at the highest tower, looking north, his breath clouding. A raven flew in the moonlight, wings silent as shadow. It circled once, then vanished into the dark. Robb stood a long time, thinking of all he had lost, all he had won, and what might yet come. He thought of his father, of the words that had shaped him, of the road that had led him here. Through blood and fire, pain and hope. He thought of the future, of the North strong and free, of the Riverlands at peace, of his sisters grown to women, of his brothers at his side. He knew peace would not last forever. The world was changing. In the east, rumors of dragons persisted. In the south, the Kraken stirred. In the west, the Lannisters nursed their wounds. Yet in this moment, atop Winterfell's walls, Robb Stark allowed himself hope. When he finally turned away, the castle was silent but for the wind. The soft tread of Grey Wind's paws, and the distant howl of a wolf in the woods. He descended the stairs, passed through the halls, and paused outside Bran's chamber. Inside, Bran sat beside the fire, his wolf curled at his feet, reading by candlelight. "Couldn't sleep?" Robb asked, entering quietly. Bran shook his head. "Too many dreams." "Good dreams, I hope." Bran looked up, eyes distant. Sometimes I fly. Sometimes I fall. Sometimes I see you on a field of snow, and there's blood in the snow and wolves all around." Robb crouched beside him, placing a hand on Bran's shoulder. "I'm here. We all are." Bran nodded and smiled. For now. They sat in silence, the fire snapping, the room warm and bright. "Tell me about the wall," Robb said, and Bran's face lit with memory. He spoke of Maester Aemon, of the Black Brothers, of the cold and the wild things that lived beyond. Robb listened, letting the sound of Bran's voice wash over him, a balm against the fear that peace would not hold. When at last he left Bran's chamber, Robb found Arya waiting for him in the corridor, her face serious. "Something's coming, Robb," she said, voice low. "I feel it in my bones. Southeast, maybe even from beyond the wall. You should be ready." "I am," Robb said, smiling. "We all are. But tonight, let's be Starks and remember what it means to be home." Arya nodded, then slipped away, silent as a shadow. Robb returned to his own chamber, gray wind curling up at the foot of his bed. He lay awake a long time, listening to the wind, the creak of timbers, the distant sound of Sansa's song. He dreamed of snow, of wolves running, of a world at peace and at war, forever turning. He dreamed of banners flying above Winterfell, of children's laughter and men's cheers, of his father's hand upon his shoulder. And when he woke, the sun was rising, gilding the land with new light. He rose, washed, dressed, and stepped out into the cold morning. The castle was alive, his people at work, the world waiting. Robb Stark, king in the north, walked among them, ready for whatever dawn would bring. The past was not forgotten, nor the scars it left. But hope, like the wolf, endured. The days passed, turning into weeks, then months. Word came from the south. Stannis still held King's Landing. Melisandre's fires burned in the city's septs, but the peace held. The Ironborn raided the coasts but found little. The Vale remained aloof, Dorne watchful. The Westerlands quiet but not beaten. In the east, rumors grew. Merchants spoke of dragons in the sky, of a young queen gathering armies. Ravens brought tales of cities falling, of slavers broken and freedmen marching. Robb read each letter with care, pondering what it might mean for the world. He sent envoys south and east, trusted men and women, bearing gifts and promises. He rebuilt the North's defenses, trained new levies, stocked the granaries. He met with the clan chiefs from the mountains, with the marsh lords and the fishermen of the White Knife. He listened, learned, and led. He spent evenings with his family, sharing stories, dreams, and fears. Sansa grew into her grace, beloved by the people. Arya vanished for days at a time, returning with new skills and secrets. Bran walked the halls with a wisdom beyond his years. Rickon chased the wolves through the woods. Catelyn ruled the keep with gentle strength. Edmure served as Robb's right hand in all things. Winter came at last, slow and hard. Snow piled against the walls. The world turned white and silent. Fires burned bright in every hall, and songs rose into the cold. The people endured, as they always had. One night, as the wind howled and the snows piled high, Robb stood atop the highest tower, gazing north. The sky was dark, stars bright and cold. He thought of his father, of all he had learned and lost. He thought of peace, of the battles won, and those yet to come. He felt the strength of the land beneath his feet, the legacy of 1,000 years. He felt the weight of his family, the hopes of his people, the pull of destiny. And in that moment, Robb Stark knew who he was and what he must do. He turned from the cold and walked back into the warmth and light of Winterfell, the king of a people who had learned to hope again. And so the North endured, in peace and in war, as the world turned and the story continued. Banners flying, wolves howling, firelight flickering across ancient stone. The dream was not ended, nor would it end, so long as the heart tree stood, and the wolves ran, and the children of the North remembered the old words and the lessons of home. Oh hey, hey! Wind roared down from the last river, carrying a silvered chill that pierced the marrow and set the banners of Winterfell to snapping with such ferocity the guards on the walls turned their collars and grumbled of the winter to come. Snow lashed the stones by dawn, first in flurries, then in fat, swirling flakes that blanketed the bailey, softened the contours of old scars on the gatehouse, and quieted the clamor of the world to a hush that felt hope. Wolves liked it, men less so. Gray wind left prints like ghostly runes through the yard, the only sign of motion when all others huddled for warmth. Robb Stark watched from the high window of his solar as the snows erased yesterday's tracks, concealing even the memory of toil. For a time he simply watched. It was his habit now, in the deep hours before council or quarrel or letters that bore ill tidings, to measure the world not in problems or victories, but in the silent artistry of weather. The heart tree in the godswood glimmered under a crust of white-red leaves iced over. Smoke rose from every chimney, and the smells of bread and wood and animal musk drifted in through the cracks, filling the chamber with a sharp, living scent. He wrapped himself in a heavy cloak and descended to the yard, nodding to the guards. His gait was measured, calm. A king, but a brother too, a son, a man bearing scars beneath his furs. In the kitchen, he found Sansa kneading dough with the kitchen girls, her cheeks ruddy, eyes lively with purpose. She greeted him with a grin and a wry, "Did the Wolf King sleep well?" "Well enough. Have you seen Arya?" She was gone before dawn. She promised Bran she'd find a winter rose for his windowsill. "If anyone can, it's Arya." Sansa glanced at him, worry flickering beneath the jest. "She's changed, Robb. You know that." "She survived," he said quietly. "Like we all did." He walked through the bustling keep, listening. A stable boy's song, the rasp of whetstones, the thud and creak of axes splitting wood. Each noise was familiar, grounding, but a dozen times a day his mind would flicker south to King's Landing, or east where rumors of dragons multiplied, or north, beyond the wall, where the wild was rising again. He kept those worries close, hidden beneath the calm of his voice and the steadiness of his step. Arya returned before midday, snow on her shoulders, hair wild, cheeks flushed from cold and triumph. She found him in the great hall, where Bran sat at a table near the fire, reading an old volume of Stark history, while Rickon and Shaggy Dog chased each other around a column. "I found it," Arya proclaimed, holding up a limp, blue-tinged blossom cupped in her gloved hands. "Not much left for winter, but here it is." Bran smiled, wonder in his eyes. "A winter rose from the pond? It's magic, you know." Arya shrugged. "Luck, more like." But Robb saw the pride in her posture as Bran carefully pressed the bloom between the pages of his book. "We're all lucky to be here," Robb said. The siblings exchanged glances, sharing the silent understanding, one born of all they'd endured, all they'd lost. Catelyn found them soon after, cloak trailing behind her, hair streaked with silver in the firelight. "The council waits," she said, gentle but insistent. Robb rose, touched Arya's shoulder, squeezed Bran's hand, then strode to the council chamber. Winterfell's council was a curious thing now. Old lords and young Riverlanders and Northmen, a few chosen women, trusted knights, the occasional merchant whose cleverness had earned a place at the table. Maester Luwin presided with quills and scrolls. Edmure Tully had grown into his role, his Riverland's pride tempered by the North's stern patience. Lady Maege Mormont sent her daughter Dacey to represent Bear Island, sharp-eyed, steel-voiced. Sir Roderick and a trio of seasoned captains spoke for the guard. They discussed the harvest, stores, roads, all the cares of winter. Snowdrifts were already making the causeway to White Harbor perilous. A caravan from Deepwood Moat was late. Salted meat and grain would last 2 years if rationed, less if refugees kept trickling in. The people of the Dreadfort, now Stark's men, still chafed under their new lords. Old hatreds took generations to mend. Robb listened, asking questions, proposing solutions, sometimes simply offering a silent nod. He delegated disputes, smoothed ruffled feathers, and when dissent grew heated, he cooled it with memory, reminding all that a North divided had nearly perished in southern fires. The greatest tension, unspoken but always present, was news from the south. Stannis Baratheon held King's Landing yet, ruling with a rigid hand and a new faith. The city was quiet, the Lannisters cowed, but there were rumors of fire priests burning effigies in the streets, of spies from Dorne, whispers of ships flying Kraken banners raiding the coasts. The Riverlands under Edmure and his council prospered, but raiders and bandits prowled the borders, and the Vale's lords still refused all entreaties. And east, always east, Daenerys Targaryen was on the move, the tales growing wilder by the month. Dragons, armies of freed slaves, alliances struck with lords of old Valyria. Every merchant brought a new story, and every tale, true or false, sent a tremor through the north. When the meeting broke for the noon meal, Catelyn remained behind. She waited until the others were gone, then placed her hand on Robb's arm. "Something stirs in the world, Robb," she said. "I feel it in the wind, in every raven's call. You must be ready." He nodded, feeling the weight of her gaze. "We are strong here, Mother, but I know peace is a guest that never stays long." He left the council chamber and walked through the yard to the smithy, where the clangor of hammer on anvil rang like a call to arms. Gendry, once a bastard in King's Landing, now master smith of Winterfell, worked with the apprentices, forging axes and arrowheads, mending old swords. He looked up, face streaked with soot, grinned at Robb. "Your Grace, the new steel is as good as I've ever worked. If trouble comes, we'll be ready." "Good," Robb replied. "I'll have need of your skill." He continued on, meeting with Jonas the stable master, then inspecting the wall repairs, checking the granaries, walking the kitchens and the old crypt. He found comfort in these rounds, in the rhythm of labor and the slow, steady heartbeat of the castle. In the crypts, he paused before his father's statue, the cold stone face so like his own. He laid his hand upon the hilt of the carved greatsword, closed his eyes. "Father, I hope you'd be proud," he whispered. "I have made mistakes, but I will not let the North fall." When he emerged, Arya was waiting for him, sword at her belt, hair tangled, eyes fierce. "You promised to train with me," she said. "Are you too much a king now for your little sister?" "Never," Robb said, and together they sparred in the yard until sweat poured from them and the snow melted beneath their boots. Their laughter carried up to the ramparts, where Sansa watched with a smile, sewing in her lap. Evenings brought counsel again, planning, writing letters to lords and friends, reading reports from White Harbor and the Wolf's Wood, the Sisters, the Neck. Bran brought word from the Ravens, an unusual number migrating early, a sign of heavy snow to come, or perhaps something stranger. Rickon told tales at supper of wolves howling in the western woods, wild and free. Through it all, the days fell into a rhythm. Work, counsel, laughter. The quiet joy of home rebuilt, the ever-present shadow of what might come. Robb learned patience, listening to the old, trusting the young, relying on the strength of family. Winter deepened. The snow grew heavier. One morning, word came that the lakes had frozen clear to the bottom, the first time in living memory. Robb ordered new supplies sent to the outlying villages, wagons loaded with grain and dried fish. The castle stores opened with careful generosity. The people responded in kind, loyalty blossomed, and gratitude turned to pride. As the cold held, stories came north. Tales of Stannis' hard rule, of Melisandre's fires burning bright, of Lannisters plotting revenge in the shadows. There were rumors, too, of Ironborn gathering at Pike, of new sails on the horizon. Daenerys Targaryen's name became a watchword, a hope, and a warning. One night, when the wind howled and snow piled against the windows, Robb called a council in the great hall. Fires blazed, The banners hung heavy, and every seat was filled. "We are strong," he said, "but we must not be blind. There are threats to the south and east, dangers old and new. I will send envoys to the Vale, to Dorne, to the free cities. I will strengthen our walls, train our men, stock our stores. If war comes, we will face it as Starks, together." Men back. Lady Mage stood, fist on the table. "We are with you, Robb Stark. Bear Island does not forget." Edmure nodded. "The Riverlands are yours to call." The others murmured assent. Some eager, some wary, all resolved. That night, Robb walked the ramparts alone. The sky was a vault of stars, the wind alive with the promise of snow. He looked north, then east, then west, feeling the weight of the world. Grey Wind joined him, silent and watchful. In his chambers, Sansa waited, eyes troubled. "Do you think it will come to war?" she asked. "It always does," Robb said. "But we are ready." She pressed his hand, smiled. "Then let it come." Months passed. Snow deepening, the world turning. The north endured, the Riverlands flourished. Alliances were forged and tested. Messengers came and went. Feasts were held, songs sung, battles planned and avoided. Robb learned the art of peace, the challenge of holding ground when war was easy, the labor of tending to the small wounds of a realm rebuilding. One spring morning, as the first thaw turned the snow to rivers and the sky brightened, a raven arrived from White Harbor. Its message was brief, urgent, and stamped with the merman's seal. Dragons sighted at sea. Daenerys Targaryen sails for Westeros. Robb stood in the hall, the letter in his hands, the world shifting once more. Arya watched him, hand on her sword. Bran looked up from his books, eyes wide with knowledge. Sansa stood beside Catelyn, her jaw set, her face calm. "Then the game begins anew," Robb said softly. "Let the north be ready." He strode to the ramparts, the banners lifting in the spring wind, the snow melting to reveal new green beneath. Grey Wind threw back his head and howled, the sound echoing over field and forest, river and mountain, a song of warning, of hope, of home. Robb Stark, king in the north, son of Eddard, brother, lord, stood watch as dawn broke over Winterfell, his people at his side, his heart strong. War or peace, hope or sorrow, whatever the world brought, he would meet it as a wolf of the north. The story would go on. Anani. Al-Nakal. The thaw was slow, as if winter itself had chosen to linger in the north and give no easy blessing to those who'd weathered her storms. Drifts clung to the shadows of Winterfell's towers long after the sun had melted the open yards. The godswood ran with rivulets as old snow bled away and vanished into black earth. On the battlements, icicles fell with dull, echoing thuds, and the first green shoots forced their way through gaps in the stone, defiant as any Stark. The castle's breath was visible in the early mornings, cooks, guards, and hounds alike puffing pale clouds, while the sky glowed pale violet with the promise of a new season. Robb Stark moved among his people, cloak cast aside when the noon sun broke the cold, accepting with a smile the greetings of the small folk and the respectful bows of the garrison. Each face he saw, aged with work, lined by worry, brightened by hope, marked another life held in the fragile peace his victories had bought. He found satisfaction not in the shouts of banners or the clash of war, but in the laughter of children in the yards, the hiss of new green in the gardens, the soft bleating of lambs in the spring fields. He spent hours each day among his siblings. Bran, grown into a curious, wise-eyed boy, would sit by the heart tree and read aloud from old books, his wolf always sprawled beside him. Rickon, wild and laughing, chased the hounds and was as likely to climb the walls as run the yard. Arya vanished for long stretches, always returning with stories of ravens on the wing, new friends among the wildlings settled in the outlying lands, or secrets from beyond the walls that made Robb smile and Catelyn worry. Sansa flourished as spring touched the land. Her presence in the kitchens became a blessing. Her songs lifted the hearts of the tired. Her hands found ways to use what little was left from the winter stores. and her letters to the Riverlands and White Harbor wove bonds stronger than any blade. At night, she would read by candlelight to her siblings and to the children of the castle's servants, weaving tales of old heroes and new beginnings. The north was healing. The roads cleared, and wagons rumbled in from White Harbor with salted fish, from the mountains with iron and silver, from the green lands to the south with grain and spring apples. Markets returned to the villages, first hesitantly, then in earnest, laughter and bartering, music and dance. Robb attended these gatherings as often as he could, unarmed but for his name and his smile. And the people welcomed him as their own. King, yes, but also kinsman, shepherd, and son. The tasks of rule never faded. Letters arrived each morning, sometimes by raven, sometimes by courier. Stannis' Baratheon seal came often, rigid and cold in tone. The Iron Throne was secure, he insisted. Westeros needed no aid from the north, but neither would the king brook interference from the Wolf's Den. Yet beneath the surface, there were requests: wheat for the garrisons in the Riverlands, iron for the Blackwater fleet, wool and salt for the ports. Robb answered each with measured words, never giving too much, never risking the peace with open defiance, always ensuring his people's needs came first. From the west, the Lannisters nursed their wounds and sent nothing but silence. Casterly Rock was a shadow on the edge of the realm, the gold flowing slower each year. In the Mountains of the Moon, the Vale still watched and waited, its new young lord, under the tutelage of shrewd advisors, who replied to every stark missive with careful courtesy, but never true commitment. News from the east came wild, breathless, unsettling. Daenerys Targaryen's fleet, rumored to be swollen with freedmen and exiles, was said to have landed in the Stormlands. Her dragons, grown beyond all legend, had been seen wheeling over the sea at dusk, fiery shapes silhouetted against the clouds. The Golden Company, broken in Essos, had crossed the narrow sea and vanished into the Reach. Dorne's banners rode the marches, watching, waiting, choosing not yet to rise. One evening, as the sun bled gold through the broken clouds, and the shadows lengthened across Winterfell's walls, Robb met with his council. Catelyn sat at his right, her wisdom quiet and deep. Edmure Tully presided over the Riverlords gathered for the new harvest season. Lady Maege Mormont, fresh from a hunting trip, arrived in furs with her daughter at her side. Maester Luwin laid out his maps, spreading scrolls filled with recent tidings and old secrets. "The dragons will turn the world," Maege said, voice rumbling like thunder in the high beams. "Stannis will not yield, nor will he risk the north marching south. But the Targaryen girl, if half the tales are true, she brings fire with her, and not just from her beasts." "She brings change," Edmure agreed, his fingers restlessly drumming on the table. "The Riverlands remember Aegon's last coming. My grandfather saw fields turn to ash." Robb listened. He traced the lines on the map, his mind running down the roads that snaked from the Dreadfort to the Neck, from Moat Cailin to the sea. "If Daenerys seeks to unite the realm, she'll need the north," he said at last. "But I will not bow to fire or steel. If she sends envoys, we'll receive them. But Winterfell stands apart." Catelyn's voice was gentle, but insistent. "Be wary, Robb. You are strong, but even the heart of the north can be pierced by southern daggers." "I know," he said, and squeezed her hand. "I'll not forget it." As spring turned to early summer, the tension in the world deepened. A drawn breath before the storm, Robb sent trusted men, old companions of his father, seasoned lords, even Arya, whose clever tongue and quiet steps had earned her a place among his messengers, to carry his greetings and gauge the winds of the south. They returned with tales both hopeful and grim. Stannis' hold on King's Landing was as tight as a fist. The Ironborn were raiding again in the Western Isles, and Daenerys had taken Storm's End without blood, her dragons keeping the garrison penned behind its high walls until they surrendered. At Winterfell, preparations began in earnest. The granaries were stocked, the smithy blazed night and day, new bows and axes fashioned for every man and boy of age. The maesters oversaw the writing of letters, the copying of records, the training of new ravens for messages that must travel swiftly and unerringly in the months to come. Through it all, Robb remained a presence, king, but more. He judged disputes, presided at weddings, blessed the first lambs of the season. He hunted with Bran and Rickon, laughed with Arya and Sansa, sat long hours with Catelyn by the fire. At night he would walk the ramparts, gray wind pacing silently at his side, watching the stars wheel overhead, listening to the sigh of the wind through the pines. On the first day of true summer, when the sun rose like a coin above the eastern hills, and the air held the sweetness of new grass, a rider came from the south, bearing a banner none had seen in a generation. Silver and gold, a three-headed dragon on black. He was received in the yard with all the ceremony of old. Banners unfurled, horns blown, the guards resplendent in new-washed cloaks. Robb came down from the high hall, his sisters at his side, his council behind him. The rider, a woman in silver mail, dismounted and knelt. "My queen bids you greeting, king in the north," she said, voice carrying clear and bold. "Daenerys Stormborn, of House Targaryen, invites you to meet at the heart tree of the Godswood, in peace and under the eyes of old and new gods alike." Robb studied her a moment, then nodded. "You have safe conduct, as does your queen." The rider smiled, relief breaking through her composure. "She will come at sundown, with 3 companions. No more." "Then?" So it was agreed. The castle trembled with anticipation. Catelyn warned, no trust, but no insult. Sansa chose a dress, the color of pale sky. Arya vanished for hours, returning with muddy boots and a dangerous glint in her eye. At sundown, Daenerys Targaryen entered Winterfell through the eastern gate. She rode a white horse, her hair shining like moonlight, her cloak the blue of summer twilight. At her side rode 2 knights, Sir Barristan Selmy, grave and proud, and Sir Jorah Mormont, home at last to the north he had once betrayed. The third companion was a woman in red, Melisandre, whose eyes glittered with secrets. The meeting took place in the Godswood. The air was cool, scented with sap and old earth. Daenerys approached the heart tree, her head bowed. Robb met her in the clearing, his council at a respectful distance. The wolves were present, Grey Wind and Ghost and Nymeria, the latter having returned to Arya after a long absence, lean and wild. Daenerys spoke first. "I come not as conqueror, but as kin. My blood runs old in this land. The North remembers. I seek not your fealty but your friendship." "Let him out." Robb inclined his head. "You find it here, so long as you come with peace. We have seen enough war." She smiled, and it was both fierce and sad. "So have I. Yet peace must be forged, and the world must be remade. I would see the North stand free, so long as Westeros stands whole. I offer you alliance, shared strength, mutual defense, respect for borders and traditions. No dragon will fly north but by your leave. No wolf need ride south unless you will it." Robb considered. He looked to his mother, to his council, to his siblings. All of them watching, all of them waiting for his word. "It is a good beginning," he said at last. "We will speak more, here and in King's Landing. The North stands apart, but not alone. Let there be peace, and let it last." They sealed the accord with shared words beneath the heart tree, and as the sun fell, the torches burned bright, and the people of Winterfell feasted long into the night. Daenerys remained 3 days, learning the North, listening to its people, laughing with Arya, debating with Bran, sharing counsel with Robb. When she departed, she left behind gifts, a cache of rare seeds for the Winterfell gardens, silks from the free cities, a promise of trade and learning. In return, Robb sent his own envoys south, among them Bran, to see the world and learn what must be learned. The seasons turned. The world outside Winterfell grew turbulent. Stannis mustered his armies in the south. Dorne moved to open alliance with Daenerys. The Lannisters plotted and watched. The Ironborn raided and burned. But the North endured, bound by old vows and new hope. Robb's days passed in labor, his nights in quiet thought. He ruled with justice and mercy, drawing on the wisdom of his mother, the courage of his sisters, the counsel of his lords. He hunted with Rickon, sparred with Arya, debated with Sansa, and learned from Bran's letters sent from afar. In time, peace became the new habit of the land. Wolves ran again in the deep woods, children's laughter rang through the yards, and the fields flourished under sun and rain. The north was whole, the riverlands strong, and hope hard-won and dearly kept, blossomed in the hearts of those who had survived. One clear night, Robb stood atop the walls, the stars ablaze above, gray wind at his side. He looked to the horizon, south, east, north, and west, and breathed deep of the clean, cold air. The world would change again, and soon. But Winterfell stood, the Heart Tree watched, and as long as the pack remained, the north would not fall. And so, in the light of the rising moon, Robb Stark, king, brother, son, and friend, smiled into the darkness and found, for the first time in many years, that his heart was untroubled and at peace.